Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting part 2 of an exciting new series. What if Vigilante Deku had a healing quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by Ground Zero Bakugo on archiveofourown.org. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. Zero was surprised that everyone was still standing after today's training, considering that half of them looked like they were already asleep. The Pussycats were excitedly telling them that they were cooking their own meals from now on, and Zero sympathized with them. Even after 12 straight hours of training, they were still being worked. When the students started to move, Zero turned to Aizawa. "You're going to give them a break, right? Let them sleep in." His tired, bloodshot eyes met his. "This camp isn't supposed to be easy. They are here to train." Zero nodded. "Yeah, but don't you think it'll be hard when they collapse from exhaustion? Plus, they could get seriously hurt. It's only 6, and you guys are still planning to keep them out here. Even if it isn't for training, then you still have your remedial class." Aizawa held out a hand. "Okay, I get it. I'll think about it." The teenager shifted until his back was to the students before reaching up and pulling the face mask off so that Aizawa could Izuku's sparkling grin. "You're the best, you know that?" he said. Then, without caring about who could possibly be watching, Izuku hugged him. Aizawa's eyes bulged in shock. He looked around, but no one seemed to be watching them. The man smiled behind his capture weapon and laid a hand on Izuku's soft green curls. The moment between father and son was interrupted when a hand pulled on Izuku's pant leg. Izuku looked down to find his little sister there with big eyes. "Izuku? Where is Toga going?" The teen blinked, and both he and Aizawa looked in the direction where indeed the boy was walking into the forest and out of sight. Izuku hummed and broke away from Aizawa. "I don't know. How about we go find out?" he said, and Eri nodded. "Can we bring him food?" she asked, and Izuku smiled. "That's a great idea." He pulled his mask back up and pulled her along to the huge pot filled with curry. Eri and Zero followed the small footsteps all the way up to a cliffside overlooking the entire forest. They found Toga sitting close to the ledge with his legs tucked against his chest. Zero smirked when he heard the boy's stomach growl. "I heard that," he said as they walked up to him. Toga's head snapped up, eyes wide, and stumbled to his feet with a glare. "How did you find me?" he demanded, and Zero shrugged. "We just followed the trail of your footsteps. You didn't need any food, so Eri and I brought you some. Go away. This is my secret hideout." Zero blinked, looking around. "This is a secret hideout? That's pretty cool, kid," he said. Toga sneered and looked away when Zero offered him the bowl of curry, choosing to sit back down and just let his stomach continue to protest. Zero sighed, sitting with him, Eri coming around to Toga's other side. "Your parents were the water hose duo, right?" he asked bluntly, and Toga gasped, spinning to him. "Did Mandalay tell you?" he demanded, and Zero held his hands up. "She told me what happened, not who they were. I remember them, saw them on the news. I remembered thinking that if I was there, then I could have saved them, but they were too far away." The boy sneered at him. "So you were a hero? Did you just want to take him down so you could get all the glory?" he snapped, and Zero shook his no. "No, I'm no hero. I'm what people call a vigilante, someone who helps civilians illegally." Toga looked away. "It's the same thing," he grumbled, and Izuku smiled bitterly. They sat in silence before Zero told him his story. "You know, I don't like heroes either," Zero confessed, and Toga stiffened. "There was a time when I wanted to be a hero more than anything with my best friend. But then my quirk appeared, and he wanted nothing to do with me anymore. That's when I became a vigilante. I was doing it for a couple of years before," he hesitated, "before a hero killed my mother," he whispered. Both of the children's eyes widened. "That's right. He never told Eri about this either. It was an accident, I suppose. But back then, I didn't see it that way. She got caught up in a villain attack, looking for me when I ran away. The villain had used her as a human shield so that the hero, Zepter's blades, went through her instead. I hunted him down. I wanted to kill him, and I almost succeeded, but then Eraserhead stopped me. He's the hobo-looking man that is teacher class 1A. Zero smiled, looking at the stars. "I'm glad he did, though," because then I wouldn't be any better than he was. I've accepted that it was an accident, but that resentment never left. He looked at Koda's pale face. You and I have more in common than you think. With that, Zero stood stretching. All right, I'm gonna head back. He looked at his sister. Are you coming with me? You can stay if Koda wants. They both looked at the boy, who blushed and nodded. She can stay. Zero smirked. Someone was developing a little crush. How cute. He left the bowl of curry on the ground. I'll leave that here for you then. Be safe, you guys. He started his trek back down the mountain. Aizawa had taken his advice and let his class sleep in, making them look more energetic, but would probably feel the same exhaustion as the night before. Maybe the teachers would let them have another night in the hot springs. Todoroki, Zero called, walking towards them. Come with me, he demanded, continuing past him. Todoroki followed him suspiciously until he led him to a metal barrel. Get in, Zero said, pointing to the barrel. He furrowed his brows, but listened. Now use your ice and take it as far as it can go around you. Then use your fire to melt it. Zero held up a hand when he started to protest. I don't care about the vow you made to defy your father. You're here to extend your Quirk's abilities. So remember what I said and use your fire. Zero walked away, looking for anyone else to help. He looked over to Katsuki and watched him sink his arms into boiling water, then pointed them above him to let out an explosion as he did against Uraraka in the sports festival with a yell. He's been doing that for hours. His arms have to be on fire with how much he's going past his limits. But he never stopped. Zero admired that kind of dedication. He was so determined to become number one, to become the best. There were no words to describe how much Izuku misses him. He was going to tell him someday, but now wasn't the time. He walked towards Aoyama and Uraraka, who looked just seconds away from puking, and continued his job as an instructor. After the classes made their own dinner again, the Pussycats announced the first fun activity of the summer training camp. Eri had disappeared, and since Koda wasn't in sight either, then they must have gone to Koda's cliff. He was happy that she made a friend, but was also sad to know that they wouldn't see each other often after they left the camp. Now we filled our bellies and washed the dishes, and now it's time for a totally awesome test of courage. Ashido was almost bursting at the seams with excitement. Not so fast. Aizawa yawned. It pains me to say this, but the remedial class will be having class with me instead. You're kidding me? Sorry. He didn't sound sorry, though, as he wrapped his capture weapon around the five of them. Your training today didn't impress me, so I have to use this time. Give me a break. Let us be tested. Aizawa ignored them as he dragged them back into the building. Zero snickered. Poor guys. Ida noticed Zero, finally alone, and approached him with a sense of gratitude weighing on his shoulders. With a deep breath, he gathered his thoughts and walked up to the mysterious vigilante. Excuse me, Ida began, a mix of determination and appreciation in his voice. I wanted to thank you for saving my brother, Tensei. Your intervention meant a lot to him, and to our family. Zero, still in his distinct costume, turned to face Ida. The masked visage gave away nothing, but there was a subtle acknowledgement in his posture. I don't know who you are behind that mask, Ida continued, but you've earned my gratitude. Tensei told me about the person who came to his rescue, and I felt it was only right to express my thanks directly. The air held a moment of quiet acknowledgement between them, the weight of gratitude and unspoken words lingering beneath the surface. Zero remained silent for a moment, the mask concealing any visible expression. Then, in a low, modulated voice, he replied, "Saving lives is what I do. Your brother was in danger, and I couldn't stand by. No thanks needed." Zero turned his back to him, watching the group of students try and fail to make food. "I hope you continue your vigilant efforts," Ida added, a sense of respect evident in his tone. He bowed. "You have our appreciation, Zero." With a respectful nod, Ida walked back. "Okay, so Class B will be the first to be the scarers. Class A will leave in pairs every 3 minutes. There are tags with your names written on them in the middle of the route, so bring those back with you. Those being the scarers aren't allowed to make direct contact. Show us how scary you are with your quirks. The class that makes the most people piss their pants with creativity and imagination wins." Ragdoll explained with that ever-present goofy smile. As soon as teams were made and students walked through the forest, it didn't take long for the screams to start. You didn't want to join them? Mandalay asked when she came up next to him, leaning up against the tree. Nah, it would have been an odd number, and I'm not a student. But you're still a teenager, aren't you? I can tell by your height and voice. You should be having fun, don't you think? She said, and Zero's eyebrows furrowed, nostrils flaring. Is that smoke? He sniffed again and walked away from the pro, ignoring her questions and looking over the tree line, where smoke was indeed growing. Todoroki and Kakin wouldn't be that stupid to start a fire. Even if they did get scared, his eyes widened. Someone's here, he spun around. Mandalay's. Peachy Bob started to float in the air, a blue aura surrounding her, before she was pulled back into the bushes with a yelp. Zero followed her and grasped Blackout when he found her sprawled on the ground, unconscious with blood leaking from her head. A woman stood over her with a beam of concrete. Tiger burst in next to him. Pixie Bob! The woman chuckled and Zero went white, his sniper lowering. Koda, Terry. He trusted Tiger to handle her and ran towards Koda's hideout. Koda whimpered, backing up with Eri behind him when the hulking figure in front of him stepped forward. Mandalay's voice filtered into his head. Koda, can you hear my telepath? Hurry up and come back to camp. I'm sorry. I don't know where you usually go off to. I'm sorry, Koda. I can't go save you. Come back as soon as you can. I tried searching somewhere with a nice view, and I ended up finding a face not on our list. Hey, by the way, you got a nice hat there, kid. The hooded figure pointed at the white mask covering his face. Trade with me for this lame mask. They made me wear this toy since I'm new, saying they couldn't get the shipment in time or something. Koda screamed and pulled Eri down the mountain. Oh well. The guy threw the mask away and jumped in front of the two of them before they could get too far. I think you and I should have some fun up here, kids. Ready? Tendrils of muscle snaked from inside his arm, encasing it. He pulled it back and lunged, making Eri scream. His black hood fell, and Koda felt the breath leave his lungs. He recognized that grinning face. He saw him on TV after his parents were killed. Water hose. They were wonderful heroes. But the couple's bright lives were cut short by a single cruel criminal. The suspect is still on the run, and police and heroes are on his trail. The suspect's quirk is a simple power-up type, and he is very dangerous. If you see this face, contact the police or a hero immediately. In addition, the suspect goes by the name Muscular and is thought to have sustained an injury on his left eye from his fight with Water Hose earlier. It was him. He was the one that killed them. Papa Mama, he whimpered. The villain almost reached them before a gunshot rang, and he suddenly started to convulse. The man collapsed to the ground, and Zero stood behind him, cocking his reloaded gun and running up to the 6-year-olds. Are you guys okay? He asked, looking them over for any injuries. Both of them were crying, but otherwise looked unharmed. He sighed with relief that he got here in time and turned to the villain again. I'm going to distract him. You guys need to get out of here and back to camp, he said, widening his stance when the man started to stand again. Don't worry, guys. I won't let him touch you. Oh my, I wonder why that is. You'll protect them? That sounds just like a wannabe hero would say. Your kind shows up everywhere, talking about justice. You're the one called Zero, right? This is perfect. We were told to take the initiative and kill you. More muscle crawled up his arm. I'll make sure to torment you thoroughly. So show me your blood. He lunged and Zero raised his gun, firing the bullet before Muscular could do anything about it. The bullet tore through the grown muscle on his side and into his real skin. He yelled when blood squirted out. Zero had never used any of his real bullets ever, but desperate times called for desperate measures. It was actually luck that it was just a flesh wound when he was moving so fast. You're not coming anywhere near them while I'm here. He reached back and loaded an explosive bullet. More muscle grew from his side, covering the bullet wound and stopping the bleeding. Muscular growled. Oh yeah, hey, maybe you can help me out a little bit first. Do you know where a kid named Bakugo might be around here? Zero stiffened. Kakin, I still have to do my job. He attacked again, and Zero fired the bullet at his feet. The ground exploded, sending the man back into the mountainside. He reloaded the gun with another real bullet and ushered the two kids in front of him. Run! They listened, with Zero behind him. They were his first priority. The mountain shook and Zero gasped. He quickly pushed Eri and Koda to the side and turned to face the man again. But he couldn't raise Blackout in time, and Muscular's fist smashed into his arm, sending him into the mountain next to the kids. Zero screamed, his arm tearing and breaking. "Aizu Zero!" Eri screamed and kneeled next to him, a river of tears flowing from her eyes. Blackout smacked against the ground next to him. Zero sucked in a breath and moved his functioning hand to his damaged arm, wincing when it glowed red. "Remember water hose?" Koda said, trying to distract Muscular from advancing. "My mom and my dad. Did you torment them like that too, before you killed them?" Zero's eyes widened. Muscular scrunched his eyebrows, spitting out blood. "Huh? Seriously? Those losers were your parents? Well then, this must be fate. It's thanks to them that my left eye is artificial now. This is all your fault. Nothing in the world is right anymore, and it's because of crazy guys like you." He screamed. Muscular just sighed. Kids are always so quick to say it's someone else's fault. Don't get the wrong idea. It's not like I took them out just because I was mad about the eye thing. I just wanted to kill people, and those two wanted to stop me. It was the result of all of us doing what we wanted. What's wrong is wanting to do something you are unable to do. That's why your dear old mommy and daddy died. He summoned more muscle, and Zero's arm barely turned yellow before he let his power go and lunged at the villain, leaving Blackout behind. "You ruined his life, and you won't take the blame?" His injured arm thrust forward and got trapped in the muscle of his shoulder. "Got you now. Doesn't matter how quick you are. And then what? You gonna punch me with that weak arm of yours?" No, he unsheathed the 9-foot black knife on his thigh. "I'm gonna do this." He attacked and sank the knife into Muscular's other eye. His scream echoed across the whole mountain, and the flesh released Zero's arm. The vigilante stumbled back and fell to his knees, dropping the knife. "Izuku!" Eri whimpered and wrapped her arms around his side. He breathed heavily. "What are you guys still doing here?" He panted. "You need to get back to camp." Eri was already shaking her head. "I'm not leaving you," she cried, and Zero unbuckled his 15-foot knife and gave it to Koda. "Take Eri and get out of here." "I'm not going to say it again. I can't fight him if I know you guys aren't safe. Don't tell me you're attacking him again. It won't work. Let's run." "You already managed to injure him." Zero shook his head. He wanted so badly to heal his arm completely, but that would deplete his energy, and he needed as much as he could have. He blinked. "Of course." Zero reached into his front pouch and pulled out his new bullet. He tugged his black shirt up and stabbed the small needle into his sternum. Zero grunted from the sharp pain, but his entire body started to glow, and to his shock, he could feel some of his energy returning to him. They watched the torn skin and muscle on his arm stitch itself back together and sighed with relief. Zero stood with his newfound energy. "Now go." He pushed them both gently. "Go find Eraserhead and get back to camp. I'll be just fine." Just then, Muscular started to groan and stand, now completely blind with blood streaked down from his closed eye. Koda grabbed Eri's hand with a sniffle, and they ran down the mountain. Zero watched them until they were no longer in sight. He grabbed his trusty weapon and faced Muscular once again, who ran for him blindly. Zero raised his gun. Bang! "I'll look after the other students. Protect them," Aizawa told Vlad, and the whole building shook while Aizawa ran out of the classroom. If it's a full-scale attack, he slammed the door open, taking in the black smoke and forest fire. "We're in big trouble. Looks like your concern has you distracted, Eraser." The pro-hero's head snapped to the side as a heavily scarred man in dark clothes and black hair swung a blue-flamed hand in his direction. "Vlad!" Dabi unleashed his flames upon him. The blue flames disappeared, and Dabi smirked at the empty space in front of him. Looking at the side of the building where Eraserhead hung by his scarf, Quirk activated. "Nice move." Dabi attacked again and blinked when his flames didn't flicker into existence. Not so fast. Another part of Eraserhead's capture weapon snapped out and latched onto the villain. Dabi grunted as he was pulled into the air, and Aizawa grabbed his head and kneed him under the chin before spinning him around and holding him to the ground. He took hold of his arm. What do you want, and where are your friends hiding? Dabi snarled. My what? Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Your right arm is next. He pulled, and something snapped. Be logical about this. At least save your legs. It would be a real pain to have to carry you off to jail without them. You can take your time, Eraserhead. The teacher was fast to activate his quirk again when he saw a flicker of the blue flames on his head. He looked up when the fire in the distance seemed to rumble and a gunshot echoed through the canyon. The hero's breath hitched. Midoriya, Mr. Aizawa. He looked at his 4 students coming through the forest. As relieved as he was to see them unharmed, he glared at them. Stay back. Dabi bucked him off and stood. He looked over his shoulder. That's exactly the performance I would expect from a teacher at UA. Tell me, hero. Aizawa pulled on his scarf to keep him captured, but his eyes widened when it snapped through his body. You worried for your students? Aizawa gasped. The fire that he shot earlier wasn't his quirk? Dabi grinned at him. I wonder if you can save them in the end. See you soon. Mud slapped to the ground in replacement. Ida and the others ran up to him. What was that? Did he just melt? Mineta yelled, and Aizawa sprinted past them. Get inside. I'll be back. He ran into the forest. Honestly, he didn't really know where he was going, but he needed to find any of the children. Mr. Aizawa. He slid to a halt when Eri and Kota ran up to him. He let out a sigh when they were uninjured. Are you both okay? Eri and Kota cried. You have to help him. He's fighting him alone. Kota cried, and it was just then that Aizawa noticed the familiar black knife held tightly in his grasp. His heart stalled, and he pointed behind him. Follow my footsteps back to the camp. Do not stop until you get inside. I'll go get him, don't worry. The 2 children nodded and ran. Aizawa raced up the mountain they had come from. Zero was on his knees, breath coming in short pants as he stared at Muscular's unmoving form, blood a steady stream from the hole in his forehead. It was like a mantra in his head. I killed him, I killed him, I killed him. He's dead, I shot him. The gravel crunched behind him, but he was frozen. He actually killed someone. There was blood on his hands. A hand grabbed his shoulder and turned him away from the body. Zero's ears were ringing, both from the shock and the ear-splitting gunshot that he fired. A calloused hand tilted his chin up, dragging his mask down his face, and Izuku met Aizawa's eyes. His lips were moving, but he couldn't hear a word. Aizawa cupped his face, eyes scanning his body for injuries, but they were already healed. Why? I killed him. Aizawa stiffened. Oh, did he say that out loud? The man looked at the prone villain before back at Izuku helping him up, grabbing Blackout, and leading him away from the body. Okay. When they were down the mountain, his partner kneeled down in front of him, and his hearing started to return as Aizawa shook him. Are okay? Midoriya, are you okay? Izuku was nodding before his brain could catch up. He shivered, making the pro rub his arms. Good? That's good. Come on, let's get you back to camp. He stood and pulled on his wrist. Izuku blinked and didn't move. No, they're after Kakin. I have to find him. I have to help. Midoriya, you're shaking. He couldn't finish. You're not in the right state of mind, he said instead and started to pull him again. I'll be fine. Please let me help. I have to help him. Please. He begged, and for the first time since he met him on the rooftop 3 years ago, Izuku looked like a vulnerable kid instead of the fearsome vigilante. Another boom shook the forest, jolting Aizawa back to reality. He sighed and gave him Blackout. Fine, okay. I'll keep searching for the students. Go back to camp and give Mandalay a message for me. Mandalay grunted as she was knocked back to the ground. Spinner laughed above her, raising the collection of swords above his head to deal the final blow. Bang! Spinner convulsed, dropping the strapped weapons and twitching uselessly on the ground. She spun around as Zero ran out of the bushes. Mandalay, Kota is safe. Her eyes shudder with relief. You found him? I've also got a message from Mr. Aizawa. I need you to use telepath. Tell everyone in Class A and B that Eraserhead has granted them permission to engage in combat with the villains. She nodded once. Everyone in Class A and Class B. In the name of the pro-hero Eraserhead, you are granted permission to engage in combat with the villains. I repeat, use your training. You can fight these villains. You need to send one more thing. The villains, I know why they're here. They're after Kakin. Please, you have to let the others know. He was so panicked about getting to his friend that he didn't realize that he called him by his chosen nickname. Kakin? Who's that? Izuku didn't answer. He ran straight for Magna, who kicked Tiger off of her and used her magnet quirk to make him fly towards her. Zero's eyes narrowed. Fine then. He slung Blackout over his shoulder and elongated his bow staff, positioning himself feet first so that he slammed them in her chest, knocking her to the ground. The quirk wore off, and Izuku smacked his staff into her forehead, knocking her unconscious. He took off, disappearing into the forest. Mandalay gulped, but activated her quirk again. Listen, we've discovered one of the villain's targets. It's a student named Kakin. Kakin, you should try to avoid combat and stick to a group. I hope you can hear me. Katsuki's explosions fizzled out when he heard the message. Kakin, he hasn't heard that name in 4 years. Had never expected to hear it again. Only one person called him that, and he was dead. Kakin? Who is that? Class 1B? Todoroki said behind him. Katsuki stared at the villain who was recovering from Todoroki's last ice attack. Me, Katsuki whispered, and Todoroki's eyes spun to him. But that's impossible. No one knows about that name, he said in a daze. His classmate gasped and stomped his foot on the ground, summoning more ice to block the villain's blades of teeth. Katsuki shook out of his daze and spun around to their opponent, hands popping. Todoroki glared at him. We can't start fires around here, because the flames will spread. Everyone could die if we aren't careful. Do you understand me? God, he's never been so annoyed with someone in his entire life. Katsuki snarled, but lowered his hand. Yeah, I get it. I'm not stupid. Todoroki looked deeper into the forest. Even if we retreat, there's poison gas everywhere. They're obviously trying to drive us into a corner. He huffed in agitation. What do we do? Todoroki couldn't do much. Not with a student from Class B unconscious on his back. What would he do? Zero panted as he ran through the forest, his senses heightened, alert for any sign of danger. The darkness enveloped him like a cloak, but he navigated through the shadows with ease, his steps silent against the underbrush. Suddenly, a rustling sound disrupted the quiet of the night. Zero froze, instinctively reaching for his weapon. He tensed, ready for a confrontation. But to his surprise, the figure that emerged from the darkness was not an enemy, but rather Shoji from Class 1A. Shoji, what are you doing out here? Zero questioned, his voice low, still on edge from the earlier attack. Shoji's expression was grave as he approached, his multiple arms shifting anxiously. The vigilante's eyes landed on the severed one, dripping steadily of blood. Tokoyami's dark shadow went out of control. We were ambushed by villains, and Tokoyami covered us. But the attack triggered his quirk even if he was desperately trying to hold it back. Tokoyami's quirk offensive ability obviously gets stronger when he's in the darkness. Very powerful, but very dangerous. He landed third place in the sports festival. Even in sunlight, he's powerful. He has great restraint and control. Tokoyami is easily one of the strongest individuals in Class 1A. But without that control, it makes Dark Shadow aggressive and hard to control. A roar shattered the night. Zero narrowed his eyes. How did he get this way? After Mandalay told us that we shouldn't engage, we were on high alert. But the villains still got the drop on us. I hid in the bushes and tried to cover Tokoyami, but one of my arms was cut off. It looks bad, but it's not like it's gone forever. My duple arms are capable of making duplicates. One of those was cut off. The thing is, he couldn't stand seeing me injured. The quirk he had been suppressing took over. The darker it is, the less control Tokoyami has. I had no idea his quirk could explode like this. It started lunging at any sound it heard with indiscriminate attacks. Zero lifted a hand to his chin and hummed. Dark Shadow can only be stopped when he's exposed to light. Kakin figured that out and used it against him. He nodded. That's it. He turned back to Shoji. How long can you expand your arms? Shoji blinked. Around 30 feet, I think. He responded, making Zero nod again. Good. That's plenty of room. If Dark Shadow reacts to sound, then make duplicate arms to bait him so he'll follow you without attacking your body. Yeah? Then try to find Bakugo and Todoroki so they can use their quirks on him. He bit his lip. Make sure you keep an eye on Bakugo. He's the one the villains are after. A villain let it slip that he was their target. Kakin would be fine. He didn't need to be there. Not if he was surrounded by his classmates. I should focus on finding others. But Zero disappeared before he could finish. Shoji sighed, before quietly moving further from the berserk quirk. Once he was in position, he took a deep breath and snapped his duple arms out, making as much noise as he could. Dark Shadow roared again, and Shoji was running when he heard the trees crashing to the ground and the ground beneath his feet shaking. He didn't know how long he was running until he saw his designated classmates. Their attention snapped away from the villain they were facing. Bakugo! Todoroki! We need light! Shoji yelled, running towards them. Todoroki put the student on his back on the ground and started to light his left side, but Katsuki held out a hand. No, stop! Dark Shadow spotted the villain and ruthlessly attacked, smashing him into the ground instantly. Only then did Todoroki and Katsuki use their quirks to calm Dark Shadow, and Tokoyami fell to the ground panting heavily. One problem down, many more to go. In the heart of the dense forest, Zero moved with swift agility, leaping from one tree branch to another to find his friend. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting a dim glow on the treetops as Zero navigated the shadows, his movements calculated and silent. The forest seemed to come alive with each powerful leap, the air humming with a sense of anticipation. Zero's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for any sign of Katsuki Bakugo. The leaves rustled, and the branches creaked beneath Zero's weight as he moved seamlessly through the treetops. As he jumped from tree to tree, Zero's senses heightened, picking up on faint sounds and subtle disturbances in the air. The forest canopy provided both cover and vantage points, allowing Zero to maintain the element of surprise in their pursuit. A sequel of delight reached Zero's ears. Yay! That means I'm your friend too. Zero landed silently in the tree across them. A blonde with messy buns leaned in close to Azui, who was hanging from a tree trunk by her dark green hair, while the crazy girl was caught up in whatever fucked-up fantasy she was living in. Zero noticed Uraraka crumpled on the ground a short distance away from them, limbs straining to stand back up. Ah, you're bleeding too. You look even more adorable. I just love blood. We're gonna be such good friends. She leaned in close to the frog girl, licking her lips. Zero chose that moment to intervene. Well, if it isn't the poster child for bad decisions. Did you get lost on your way to the villain's anonymous support group, or are you just naturally drawn to places where justice thrives? Zero quipped, their voice laced with a mixture of sarcasm and confidence. All three of the girls spun to his voice, and Zero hopped down from the tree, dusting off his gloved hands. Himiko Toga's eyes gleamed with a dangerous excitement, unfazed by the snide remarks. A new playmate, huh? You've got that mysterious hero vibe. I like it. But, seriously, what's with the whole Zero thing? Trying too hard to be edgy. Zero's masked expression remained stoic, unaffected by Toga's taunts. Call it what you want. Edgy, mysterious, or just someone who prefers not to broadcast their life story to every villain with a listening device. Now, let's focus on the matter at hand. Toga, undeterred, twirled a knife between her fingers. Oh, we're getting serious, are we? Fine. But I hope you're ready for a playdate with a twist. I've got a knack for turning things a bit bloody. Zero's gaze sharpened, the moonlight glinting off their visor. Bloodshed is not a game. It's a consequence, and I intend to prevent it tonight. Your twisted version of playtime ends now. He takes his bow staff, letting it snap out in his hand. He twirled it in his hands and moved in front of Uraraka. Zero lunged forward, the encounter escalating into a fast-paced dance of skill and strategy. Toga, true to her chaotic nature, reveled in the unpredictability of the confrontation. The moonlit clearing became a stage for their clash, each move a carefully calculated step or a whimsical leap into the unknown. As the battle unfolded, Toga's dangerous excitement clashed with Zero's composed determination, creating a dynamic that echoed through the darkened forest. The air crackled with tension, and the clash between vigilante and villain played out like a twisted symphony, each note a testament to the unpredictable nature of their encounter. The clash between Zero and Himiko Toga intensified, each move calculated with precision and countered with strategic finesse. Toga, with her unpredictability, aimed to exploit any opening, but Zero remained one step ahead, their movements a blend of skill and efficiency. As the battle reached its climax, Zero anticipated Toga's next move and swiftly disarmed her, rendering her weapons useless. Toga, undeterred, unleashed a flurry of acrobatic attacks, but Zero deftly dodged and countered with a series of calculated strikes. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," Zero remarked, their voice steady amidst the chaos. Toga, breathing heavily but still grinning, retorted, "Persistence is my middle name, Zero." "Well, not literally, but you get the point." In a decisive moment, Zero executed a well-timed maneuver, disorienting Toga and leaving her vulnerable. With precision, Zero incapacitated her without causing serious harm. Toga, realizing the tables had turned, let out a frustrated growl. "You're no fun, Zero." "Maybe I'll save the grand finale for another day," Toga said with a manic glint in her eyes as she hastily retreated into the shadows, disappearing into the night. Zero watched her escape, ready but not eager for a pursuit. The moonlit forest settled into an eerie calm as Zero assessed the aftermath of the skirmish. The battle may have ended for now, but the enigmatic vigilante knew that in the world of heroes and villains, the next encounter was always on the horizon. When it was obvious that Toga wasn't coming back, Zero pressed the button on his staff and it shrunk back into place. He turned to Uraraka, who was pulling the needle from Azui's hair that was keeping her pinned to the tree. The two girls turned to him with those familiar eyes of gratitude. "Are you girls okay? Did she hurt you?" They shook their heads. "No, we're good." Zero nodded. "Good. Then we need to find Kak." He cleared his throat. "Bakugo." Azui and Uraraka glanced at each other. "Shouldn't we be looking for Kakin?" "Bakugo is pretty strong, even by himself." His eyes widened. "Oh shit. I must have called him that when I told Mandalay to send the message." Zero sighed. "Kakin is Bakugo." He winced. The girls gaped. "Wait, how do you know?" "Because it was what I called him when we were kids." Azui put her finger against her chin. "So then, you guys were childhood friends? Does he know who you are?" "Ribbit." Zero shook his head, holding out his hands. No, he doesn't, and I would very much like to keep it that way, so please, you can't tell him that I'm alive." He froze. Then both the girls froze. "He thinks you're dead?" Uraraka screeched, and the boy shushed her. "Yes, now, can we please?" Uraraka, Azui, Todoroki, and Shoji walked out of the forest and up to them. "Oh good, you guys are okay?" Zero said, taking Blackout from his back and loading it with his paralysis bullets. "I'm glad Shoji and Tokoimi found you." Zero paused, looking over their shoulders and raising an eyebrow. "Speaking of, where are Bakugo and Tokoimi?" The two boys spun around before their faces went pale. "Nice trick, eh?" Their heads snapped up to the tree above them. A man with a long yellow coat, top hat, and a white and black mask. "I took the lads you're talking about with my magic." He played with the shiny blue marbles in his gloved hand. "A talent like his would be squandered were he to be cast as a hero. We shall provide him with a grander stage where he can truly shine." Zero snarled. "Give them back." "Give them back?" What an odd thing to say. They don't belong to anyone. They're their own person. Don't be so arrogant. We'll stop you. Right now. Todoroki stepped onto the ground, letting ice pillars shoot toward him. But the villain jumped away. "Why the aggression? We merely wish to show him that there are options besides the fanatic world of heroism he's drowning in. Better to choose a path that aligns with your values after all." He snatched two of our strongest classmates without a sound. "What power is this?" Todoroki glared at the villain. "If you're monologuing because you think you've beaten us, you're mistaken." He twirled the marble between his fingers. "A bad habit. I used to be an entertainer, you know. Taking Tokoimi was a bit of improv on my part. When I saw him destroying everything in sight, I decided he should join our troupe." You can't take them, Zero screamed and lifted Blackout, firing the loaded bullet. The man was glowing before he ever fired, and was suddenly gone, making the bullet hit the tree behind him. A blue marble rolled off the branch and hit the ground softly before the man appeared from it. Todoroki shoved the boy on his back into Uraraka's arms and ran. To join him, he stomped on the ground and made a huge ice barrier like he did at the sports festival, if not bigger, but the villain jumped away. Apologies, but sleight of hand and escapology are my specialties, not combat. He disappeared behind an ice spike and appeared with his hand in his pocket before pulling it out and clasping it behind his head. I'm not foolish enough to fight hero students from UA. Vanguard Action Squad, I've acquired the target. The main show has officially come to a close. Meet me at the retrieval point in the next 5 minutes for the final bow. They're going to take them, our friends. Zero didn't acknowledge them. He just started running after him, vaguely hearing the others following him. Zero slid to a stop, kneeling and setting Blackout on the ground. Uraraka, you have to make us float, and then Azui, you throw us as hard as you can with your tongue. Shoji, hold me and Todoroki, and use your quirk to correct our trajectory in the air. Measure the distance with your eyes, Uraraka, and when the timing looks right, release us. Zero, Shoji, and Todoroki all went back to back, letting Azui wrap her tongue around the three of them, and Uraraka activated her quirk, making the three of them float. All right, Sue. Uraraka backed off, and Azui tossed them into the air in hot pursuit after the yellow coat villain. When they got above him, they felt the weightlessness of Uraraka's quirk disappear, and they all kicked the villain to the ground. He let out a startled scream, and the three teenagers slammed him into the ground, making a crater from the impact. Give Bakugo and Tokoimi back to us, Zero commanded. Dabi's hands started burning with blue fire. Out of the way, Compress. The villain underneath them glowed, and a blue marble replaced him. Dabi attacked them, and the three got out of the way before the fire reached them directly. But Zero and Shoji yelled when the fire just barely licked their skin and their arms were burning. Zero! Shoji! Todoroki attacked with his eyes when twice jumped towards him. Zero dodged the silver capsule when it shot towards his face. Togo jumped into the air and knocked the vigilante onto her back. I've been thinking since I fought you, Zero. She slid a knife out of her sheath, making Zero gasp. That you'd be so much cuter if you just bled a little. Togo brought the knife down. Zero! Shoji's duply arms swiped in front of him and knocked the girl off of him. Togo yelped and slid across the ground. She was silent for a few moments before she glanced up, rage swimming through her golden eyes. So that's how it is? You want to be between us? She squeezed the knife hilt harder, and Izuku stood extending his bow staff again. Now would really be a good time for the knife he gave to Koda. Give me all you got. Twice yelled in a gruff voice and cut through the ice with the flexible weapon in his hand, landed on the flat of it, and his voice got higher. Hey man, cut me some slack. The sudden change in attitude sent Todoroki reeling. What the hell is with this guy? In the crater, compress grew from the marble. Ugh, I can't believe you wrecked my exit. Unrehearsed amateurs. He grumbled, walking to Dabi. Did you get Bakugo? Dabi asked, and compress reached into his pocket. Of course I did, but he stilled when he felt nothing there. Zero, Todoroki. We're done. He gave away his best trick. I'm not sure what your quirk is, but it has to do with those little marbles, right? Shoji stood and lifted his hand, 2 marbles held inside. So I'm guessing these are Tokoyami and Bakugo? You rescued them. Oh ho ho! Compress laughed. Will color me impressed. Just what I'd expect from someone with so many hands. The teenagers ignored them and ran away. Todoroki created an ice barrier to block them. Right? Nice job, Shoji. Dabi growled, holding out a hand. Moron. No, compress stopped him. Zero gasped when a mutated creature slipped from the forest. A gnome. They changed directions, and a black and purple mass appeared in front of them. This guy. He was at the USJ. It's been 5 minutes since the signal. Let's go, Dabi, Kurojiri said. Toga and Twice disappeared through the mini gates next to them. Compress started walking too. Hold on. We're not leaving without the kid. Don't worry. They were so proud of themselves, rooting through my pockets, that I thought I'd let them gloat," Compress said smugly. His smug statement caught their attention. Compress turned back to them. "But allow me to explain the basic rules of magic." He reached up, removed his top, and grabbed his mask. "If I'm flaunting something shiny, it means there's something else I don't want you to see." He slipped the mask to the side and opened his smirking face, revealing 2 blue marbles on his tongue. This time, they could see Katsuki's and Tokoyami's bodies trapped inside. They gasped. "He's got them!" Compress snapped his fingers, and the marbles in Shoji's hand exploded. "Is that my ice?" "That's right. During the freezing attack, I prepared dummies and slipped them into my right pocket." Zero snarled, running back towards them, Shoji and Todoroki close behind. "Damn it!" His voice cracked from desperation. Compress slipped his mask and hat back on, sinking into the warp gate. A little bit of misdirection. I do so adore a twist ending. One last bow, and then the curtain FA. A familiar sparkling beam of light shot out from the bushes and hit Compress's mouth. The villain choked, and the marbles fell from his mouth. Zero glanced to the side and noticed Aoyama cowering behind the bushes. He'd have to thank him later. Shoji reached out and grabbed one of the marbles, while Todoroki reached for the other. He was almost there. So close. He closed his wrist around the marble, and Dabi's hand snatched it before him. Todoroki went white. "Well, isn't that a shame?" Poor little Shoto Todoroki. The dual-haired colored teenager skidded to the ground. "Confirm it now." "Release them," Dabi commanded, and Compress sank back into the warp gate. "That laser ruined my finale." He snapped his fingers, and Tokoyami came flying out of Shoji's grasp, and Katsuki and Dabi's, who grabbed him by the neck. Dabi smirked. "Checkmate." "Kaken, no." The blond boy's eyes widened at the name. He stared at him, at the shining emerald eyes that haunted his mind every day. Zero reached out a hand, the sleeve of his shirt riding up and revealing the orange and black twin bracelet to him. Katsuki choked, not from Dabi's hold on his throat, but from the revelation that his best friend was actually alive. "Deku," he whispered and sunk into the warp gate, disappearing from their view. Zero collapsed on the other side from where the warp gate once stood. "Deku." He failed. Izuku failed. He was too late. The warehouse felt colder than usual as Izuku Midoriya returned, his steps heavy with the weight of guilt and concern. Closing the door behind him, Izuku took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. The dim light from the Christmas lights overhead cast shadows that seemed to mirror the turmoil within him. His gaze fell on the sparse surroundings, the warehouse a stark reflection of the challenges he faced. Izuku walked to his bed and gently set Aries' sleeping form on the pillows and stepped farther into the space to keep her from waking. The low hum of electricity echoed as Izuku meticulously checked his equipment. His costume, a symbol of his commitment to vigilantism, hung ready for action. The familiar weight of his cowl reassured him, concealing the emotions that churned beneath the surface. The events leading to Katsuki's kidnapping replayed in Izuku's mind, fueling the fire of determination within him. He couldn't stand by and allow his friend to suffer at the hands of villains. The gravity of the situation hung thick in the air, but Izuku's resolve remained unbroken. A makeshift map, hastily drawn, lay spread across a table, marked with potential locations and known villain hideouts. Izuku studied it intently, planning his route and anticipating the challenges that awaited him. His mind raced with strategies, each step a calculated move toward rescuing Katsuki. The silence of the warehouse was shattered as Izuku clenched his fists, determination etched across his features. "I won't let them hurt you, Kaken. I'll bring you back, no matter what it takes." He reached for his mask, securing it in place, the mask of the vigilante known as Zero, the alias that allowed him to operate outside the constraints of official heroism, to move in the shadows where he deemed necessary. He glanced at the little girl, oblivious to the crisis surrounding Izuku. He was nervous about leaving her here alone, but she knew her way around here, and there was plenty of food and water if she got hungry. He sighed. He needed to do this. So he took out paper and wrote her a note to let her know where he was, and left a spare knife next to it in case anything happened. As he stepped out into the night, the warehouse door creaking shut behind him, Izuku Midoriya, now Zero, embarked on a solitary mission. The city's skyline loomed overhead, a silent witness to the undying bond of friendship that drove him forward, into the heart of danger, to rescue the one who had always been by his side. Perched on the edge of a towering building, Zero gazed out over the city, a silent vigilante catching a rare moment of respite. The night had stretched on for 2 relentless days of searching for Katsuki Bakugo, leaving Zero both physically and emotionally drained. The echoes of the city below seemed distant as Zero sought solace in the quiet of the rooftop. The chill of the night air cut through Zero's costume, reminder of the urgent mission at hand. He sighed, a heavy breath escaping the confines of their mask, and ran a gloved hand through his green hair. He watched the civilians walk through the lightened streets of Mizutofu, all going on with their daily routines. Let's return to a short clip from the UA High School press conference that just wrapped up. Zero's head snapped to the jumbo screen in the streets, his eyes widening at Aizawa, Vlad King, and Principal Nizu on TV, all dressed in suits. We are here to apologize. A recent incident allowed harm to come to first-year heroes, and we staff were ill-prepared. We take responsibility for any trauma caused by our negligence. It's our duty to train heroes, but also to protect heroes in training, Aizawa said with a bow. I'll take the first question, a reporter said from behind the camera. Since the beginning of the year, UA students have had 4 encounters with villains. This time, there were students who were gravely injured. How did you explain this to their families? And what are some of the specific steps you're taking to ensure their safety in the future? Zero clenches fists. The media should know what UA's basic position is since they didn't cancel the sports festival. They just want them to look bad. We will increase patrols around the school grounds and review security measures within the school. The safety of UA's students is our main priority, make no mistake about it, Nizu said. The crowd started sneering and whispering. Zero was glad that he was too far up to hear the scorn from the people. Otherwise, he probably would have smacked them with the barrel of his sniper. You spoke about keeping the students safe, Eraserhead. But according to our information, you encouraged them to fight during the attack on the training camp, putting them in grave danger. What was your reasoning for this? His father partner leaned forward. I concluded that because we didn't know the full situation, allowing them to use their quirks would help avoid the worst possible outcome. And what would that outcome be? Do you think victims and 1 kidnapped child is a win for UA High? Much like Aizawa, Zero hated the media. They were always asking questions like it was their sole priority to make the heroes look bad for the public, putting words in their mouths and manipulating what they say. I assure you that things could have gone much more poorly. I feared every student would be tortured and killed in the end. It was Nizu who addressed the reporter next. Most of the victims were harmed by the gas attack. We've determined it to be the result of a poisonous quirk used by one of the villains. It's thanks to the quick actions of Ms. Kendo and Mr. Tetsu that injuries were kept to a bare minimum, as well as another student's quirk. Additionally, we're providing mental health counseling to every student, though at the moment, we do not see any signs of serious psychological trauma. So you found a bright spot in this tragedy? We're relieved that an entire class of burgeoning heroes still has a future. Can you say the same thing for the abducted Katsuki Bakugo? He enrolled at your school with excellent marks and went on to win the sports festival. Before that, he survived the attack of a powerful sludge villain who eventually had to be taken down by All Might. The boy is obviously strong and heroic. On the other hand, the violence he displayed in the finals and his attitude at the awards ceremony both showed that he could not control his temper. What if this is the real reason the villains kidnapped him? What if they're brainwashing Bakugo right now, pulling him toward the path of evil? How can you sit there and tell us he still has a future? Aizawa stood up, seeming to have enough with this reporter who Zero could picture was smiling smugly off the camera. But instead of losing his composure, Aizawa bowed. As Katsuki Bakugo's teacher, I take full responsibility for not taming his violent behavior. However, his actions at the sports festival were born of his deep-seated convictions. He lifted his head, staring the reporter down. He's trying harder than anyone in his pursuit to become the top hero. If the villains think they have a chance with him, then they are grossly mistaken. I can guarantee you that much. The reporter sneered. That doesn't amount to real evidence, though. I didn't ask you how you feel. I asked you if you had concrete information. We're doing our best with the intel we currently have available. I have no doubt the police will break this case very soon. We won't rest until our missing student is returned to UA, Nizu said firmly. Zero smirked when no more questions came from the reporter. They were confident in their ability to find Katsuki just as much as he was. He stood from the ledge and stretched. He grasped his grappling hook and put his finger on the narrow tongue of the trigger, but didn't fire. His attention snapped down to where 4 poorly concealed UA students were running from the crowd. Zero raised his eyebrows and started jumping from rooftop to rooftop, the darkness keeping him invisible. When they stopped to catch their bearings away from the civilians, he jumped down behind them, still concealed in the shadows. They huddled close together, discussing more of whatever plan they were brewing. Zero's eyebrows furrowed. What are you four doing? They all jumped away quickly, getting into a fighting stance, and Zero emerged from the shadows with a frown. They all relaxed and Kirishima stepped forward. Zero, we want to help too. We've been talking and have been trying to find you. With your help, we can definitely get Bakugo back. He figured that's what they were doing. Zero regarded the determined group of students with a mixture of acknowledgement and concern. Kirishima, Yarozu, Todoroki, and Ida stood resolute, their eyes reflecting a shared determination to rescue their kidnapped friend. You're still students, Zero said, his voice tinged with caution. This isn't a training exercise. It's a dangerous situation involving real villains. Kirishima stepped forward. His unwavering spirit was evident. We get that, Zero, but Bakugo is our friend. We can't just sit around doing nothing. Yaroza chimed in, her voice steady. We might not be pros, but we're not helpless either. With your experience and our determination, we can increase our chances of finding Bakugo. Todoroki added, we can be an asset, not a liability. We've faced tough situations at Udade, and we've come out stronger every time. Ida, the embodiment of order and resolve, spoke earnestly. Our quirks complement each other well, and we can strategize effectively. Let us help. Zero sighed, realizing the sincerity in their words. I appreciate your passion, but this is dangerous. Villains can be unpredictable, and I can't guarantee your safety. Kirishima grinned, undeterred. We're not asking for guarantees, just a chance to bring our friend back. While he appreciated their spirit, Zero still fought back. You're risking expulsion. The consequences can be severe. Kirishima shook his head. We've faced expulsion threats before. This is about more than rules. Zero knew Aizawa. While he was popular for expelling students, he always re-enrolled them the next day. This was different. Aizawa will not take this lightly. It's not just him you have to worry about. It's also Principal Nizu. I'm trying to help you. Go. Home. He grabbed his grappling hook, and when it wrapped around the edge of a building, he let it pull his body into the air and disappeared. It wasn't long after Zero left the students that he found the police and pro-heroes gathering around a building, including All Might and Endeavor. Zero sighed. They found him. He whispered to himself and took Blackout from its protective case, kicking the stands up and setting it on the ledge a couple of buildings over. He lay on his stomach, lined up the barrel, and watched them through the stethoscope. They didn't do anything for a couple of minutes before All Might tensed and suddenly punched through the brick wall. The heroes strategically entered the building and immobilized the villains in seconds. Still, Zero waited. Everything was calm. Their plan had worked, and it seemed that they never needed him. And for once, that made him very happy. He started to stand. Katsuki was going to be No! Zero neck snapped back to them. No longer were things calm. In seconds, chaos had erupted, and a group of Nomu ripped themselves free of the weird metallic gray sludge. Gunshots were fired, quirks were being used, and All Might had fled the scene, like he was following someone. Katsuki was nowhere to be found. Zero didn't pursue him. He repositioned himself back on the roof of the building he was on, and whenever he got clear shots, he used a combination of real, explosive, and paralysis bullets to stop the Nomu from killing anyone. Only then, when it looked like the heroes and police were back in control, did Zero tuck Blackout back into its case and race towards Kamino Ward. Zero had told them to go home. They should have gone home. Behind the wall, the 4 students were struggling to hold in any noises that could reveal their position. Who is this guy? What has happened? He took out 3 pros in an instant. We have to run. I know that, but I'm so scared my legs, my body, won't move. What in the world was that? Something splashed behind them, and then coughing. Damn it. The hell? The explosive boy almost fell to the ground as he coughed out the remaining sludge from his body. Bakugo. My apologies, Bakugo. All for one said, and Katsuki turned around where the villains emerged, gagging or covering their mouths. That was so gross. This black stuff reeks. I love it. Shigaraki stared at the man he hadn't seen in years. Master. All for one landed on the ground and walked to his protege. So, you failed once more, Tamura. But you must not be discouraged. You'll try again. That's why I brought your associates back with you. Even this child, because you judged that he was an important piece on your game board. He held out his hand, much like he did before when he found him. Start over as many times as it takes. I am here to provide you with help. All of this is for you. Katsuki growled to hide his fear. Ito wouldn't let any of them even attempt to get Bakugo. He was going to get out of there. The alleyway was completely open. There was no one in sight. They could easily escape now, but they just couldn't move. The man, whoever he was, his aura was anything like he had ever felt. His body felt exactly how it did when Stain had paralyzed him. He was helpless. They couldn't do anything. Ah, there you are. The 4 of them tensed in fear, but it wasn't them he was speaking to. They slowly and cautiously peeked over the broken wall where All Might and All for One were face to face. I'll have you return my student. All for One. All for One tilted his head. Have you come to kill me a second time, All Might? The air around them exploded, making Katsuki and the villains fly back. Even behind the wall, the 4 of them felt the force of it. All for One was still standing when the dust cleared, wiping dirt off his suit. It took you long enough to find us. It's only 5 kilometers from the bar to here, and yet it was at least 30 seconds after I sent the Nomus that you arrived. You've gotten weaker. All Might. You want to talk, it's kind of difficult to ignore that fancy life support mask you've got on. Aren't you overexerting yourself? All Might hopped in place. I won't repeat the mistake I made 5 years ago. You hear me? I will take young Bakugo back, and I will make certain you're locked up for the rest of your sad life. Right along with your despicable league of villains. He spat and jumped towards him again. Sounds like you've got your work cut out for you. This will be hard for us both. He extended his arm, and it was suddenly growing larger before it exploded, and All Might was thrown back into the building behind him. All for One looked at his now deflated arm. Air Cannon plus spring-like limbs. Kinetic Booster times 4. Strength Enhancer times 3. What a delightful combination. Maybe a few more enhancers next time. Katsuki stood, staring toward where All Might disappeared, though. All Might. Don't you worry. All for One said. It'll take more than that to kill him. Get off the battlefield, Tamura, and take that child with you. His fingertips went red and black, and sharp blades shot out, embedding themselves into the unconscious warp gate. Kirojiri. Warp them away. Magna crawled over to Kirojiri. Be careful. One of the heroes messed with him, and he's unconscious. I'm not sure what's going on, but if you can teleport, why don't you get us out of here? My warp power is still new, Magna. There is much I need to learn about it. Its distance is limited, and while he can teleport to specific coordinates, I only transport people to and from my own location. Or, with focus, to or from someone I'm very familiar with. That is all. It's easier to have Kirojiri do it. A huge warp gate opened behind them. Forcible quirk activation. Leave this place. Shigaraki tensed. What about you? A yell from farther away, and All Might was attacking again. All for One floated back into the air. You're not thinking, Tamura. There remains much room for you to grow. You're mine. All Might punched him, and All for One blocked it again with his arm. Let's go, Shigaraki. Compress said as he turned Dabi into a marble for easy transportation, while our masked lead is keeping All Might entertained. Claim your prize. Katsuki snapped at attention to them as they all surrounded him. He smirked, ready for the challenge. Huh, this is going to be fun. Hearing that, All Might pushed his nemesis out of the way and held out his hand to the teenager. Young Bakugo don't. He grunted and dodged the red and black blades. On the building on the opposite side of the students, Zero rolled to a stop on top of all the gravel on the roof. He groaned from the impact but got to his knees and watched the two most dangerous and most powerful humans fight. His eyes found Katsuki, who was struggling to avoid all of the League's attacks. All Might couldn't fight with his full strength if Katsuki was there to get caught in the crossfire. With a yell, All Might smashed into the building he was on, making Zero lose his balance and fall on his back. He hooked his arm over the ledge again and pulled himself up. Maybe if I try to take Shigaraki and the others out, Kaken might stand a chance at getting out of there. It was a long shot, but he had to try. He reached back to grab Blackout's case, but was interrupted when a huge ice glacier destroyed the wall behind Katsuki, and out came Kirishima, with Ida and Todoroki supporting him from behind, using their fire and engines to speed themselves up and into the sky. Zero huffed. I should have known that they wouldn't listen. Kirishima held his hand out. Come on, he screamed, and Katsuki listened. With a yell, Katsuki let out his strongest explosion, propelling himself up to his friends. Zero was pretty impressed. They never fought anyone, and they were out of range from any of All for One or All Might's aftershocks. He looked back over the edge to see Magna getting ready to send Compress up to the sky. Zero wasn't about to let that happen. He left the sniper's case on the roof and backed up to give himself a running start. Watch out! He's coming! Todoroki yelled to them over the wind when he saw the villain flying towards them. Kirishima growled and looked back ahead, willing themselves to go faster. His eyes widened, though, when a familiar boy ran towards them. Guys! He yelled, and everyone looked up where Zero jumped off the edge of the roof below them. Even under the mask, they could see the smirk that stretched across his face as he gave them a salute and twisted in the air, tackling Compress and sending them both back to the battlefield. Katsuki stared at him until they landed back on the ground, kicking up a huge dust cloud. His heart jumped to his throat. Deku, he whispered as they disappeared over the building. Is that really you? Zero made sure that Compress took the brunt of the impact like at the camp. The poor guy stayed on the ground, groaning while Zero hopped up. Whoa, that was a rush. He tilted his head at Compress. I guess they didn't cover mid-air takedowns 101 in your villain training program, did they? Shigaraki scowled, irritated by the interruption. You again? Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Zero crossed his arms, an air of confidence in his stance. Just trying to keep the city safe from your handiwork, Shigaraki. Maybe consider a career change. Villainy doesn't seem to be your strong suit. He tapped his chin. I hear that prison is always looking for more people. Shigaraki started to shake and scratch his neck until it bled. You little pest. You think you're so funny. How about I dust away your throat, and we'll see just how much of a smartass you are then. He, as well as Spinner, Toga, and Magna, formed a circle around him. Zero extended his bow staff and pressed the button near the top for the small blade on the end to snap out. Amidst the chaotic battleground, Zero gracefully twirled a bow staff, facing off against the four villains. The night air hummed with tension as the four of them eyed the enigmatic vigilante. Zero's voice, dripping with sass, cut through the tumultuous atmosphere. Well, looks like I stumbled upon the League of Extraordinary Antagonists. Did you guys come up with that name yourselves, or did you hire a villain marketing consultant? Shigaraki scowled, his irritation evident. You just don't know when to quit, do you? Zero grinned beneath the mask. Quitting is for amateurs, Shigaraki. Now, let's see if your little team can keep up with my dance moves. The clash began in earnest. Zero moved with fluid precision, parrying Spinner strikes, deflecting Magna's magnetic attacks, and engaging Shigaraki in a dance of blades and quirks. Each movement was a calculated step, and the bow staff became an extension of Zero's wit. As the battle raged on, Zero continued needling the villains with snarky remarks. Spinner, did you choose that name because Spinner sounded more menacing than Lizard Fanboy? Spinner gritted his teeth, swinging his sword with increased aggression. Meanwhile, Zero effortlessly switched between offense and defense, taunting Magna. Magna, darling, your magnetic personality could use a bit more charm. Maybe a makeover? Magna scowled, her irritation growing. You won't be so smug for long. Toga, with her characteristic glee, brandished a knife, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Oh, Zero, you're just my type. Let's play a little, shall we? Zero smirked behind the mask, their tone laced with taunting sarcasm. Ah, Toga, the poster child for stable relationships. I hope your love life is as sharp as that knife. Toga lunged forward, her movements erratic and unpredictable. Zero deftly dodged each strike, maintaining a composed demeanor. In the background, All Might clashed with All for One, their titanic battle sending shockwaves through the area. Zero, maintaining focus on the trio before them, continued to banter, using sass as both a weapon and a distraction. In the midst of his intense battle against All for One, All Might couldn't help but spare a moment to glance toward the spectacle unfolding in the distance. His eyes narrowed with both concern and intrigue as he observed Zero, the mysterious vigilante, engaging in a spirited fight against Shigaraki, Spinner, and Magna. The mighty clash of blades and quirks resonated through the air, and All Might couldn't deny the skill and tenacity displayed by the enigmatic hero. Zero's agile movements and strategic use of a bladed bow staff painted a picture of a hero who not only fought with physical prowess but also possessed a sharp mind. As a particularly daring move from Zero drew a smirk from the symbol of peace, All Might found himself momentarily distracted from his own battle with All for One. The relentless banter and snarky comments exchanged between Zero and the League of Villains added a unique flavor to the chaos, creating a dynamic within the fight that caught All Might's attention. All Might, All for One sneered, seizing the opportunity to strike while his opponent was momentarily diverted. However, All Might swiftly refocused, parrying the attack with renewed determination. Impressive, isn't it? All for One taunted, gesturing toward the distant skirmish. Your precious society, giving rise to new heroes, each with their own brand of justice. All Might, undeterred, replied with unwavering conviction. That's the beauty of heroism, All for One. It adapts and evolves, and new champions rise to meet the challenges of each era. Katsuki and his friends walked through the tense crowd and pushed themselves to the front of the jumbo screen in the middle of the city, watching a reporter broadcast both All Might's and Zero's fight. He didn't focus his attention on All Might, though. It was the boy fighting three people at the same time. A myriad of conflicting emotions churned within him. The reporter's frantic commentary echoed through the city streets, only focusing on All Might's battle. A knot formed in Katsuki's stomach as he grappled with the possibility that Zero might be someone he once thought was lost forever. His childhood friend, Izuku Midoriya. The very friend who, according to everyone's knowledge, had met an unfortunate end. Could it really be him? Katsuki whispered to himself, his eyes narrowed as he scrutinized the screen. The silhouette of Zero moved with an unfamiliar agility. The doubts gnawed at Katsuki's mind, conflicting with the grief he had carried for so long. He recalled Izuku's determination, his dreams of becoming a hero, and the memories they shared as children. Katsuki's fist clenched. No way. Izuku, he questioned, his voice barely audible over the city's hum. The possibility of Izuku being alive and donning the mantle of Zero clashed with the reality he had accepted. A surge of conflicting emotions overwhelmed Katsuki as he continued to watch the battle unfold. The uncertainty lingered in the air, a mystery that added another layer of complexity to an already tumultuous moment. Amidst the chaotic battleground, Zero continued his relentless fight against the League. The moonlit night bore witness to the intense clash, the air charged with tension as blades clashed and quirks collided. When it looked like none of them were getting anywhere, they all came to a stop, breathing heavily. Shigaraki's fingers twitched with unconcealed irritation. You think you can stop us, little vigilante? Zero raised an eyebrow, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Oh, I don't just think it, I know it. But nice try, Mr. My hands are more dangerous than my tantrums. Toga, her eyes glinting with manic excitement, brandished her bloodied knives. Ooh, a feisty one? I like that. Zero chuckled. Sorry, sweetheart, but I'm not into crazy exes. Spinner, with his reptilian demeanor and menacing blade, hissed, You're out of your league, kid. Zero smirked, twirling his own weapon in response. Says the lizard with a butter knife. Magna, her magnetic powers crackling with lethal intent, taunted, You'll regret crossing paths with us, hero. Zero rolled his eyes. Trust me, I've made worse mistakes. Like forgetting to buy milk. With calculated precision, Zero executed a series of swift maneuvers, exploiting weaknesses and countering the villain's attacks. Toga's manic enthusiasm, Shigaraki's decay, and Spinner's blade were met with the seasoned skill of the enigmatic vigilante. In a decisive moment, Zero capitalized on an opening. He exploited all of their visible openings quickly, but not without the sharp cold steel of Toga and Spinner's blades cutting through his flesh and Shigaraki's uncoordinated attacks, scraping his black clothes, decaying them instantly. The moonlight reflected off Zero's mask as they surveyed the defeated villains, their injuries minimal but incapacitating. Looks like the League of Villains needs to work on their teamwork, Zero remarked, a touch of sardonic humor in their voice as they stood victorious. In the background, the monumental clash between All Might and All for One continued, the echoes of their battle reverberating through the city. The fate of heroes and villains hung in the balance, the struggle between light and darkness playing out on multiple fronts. His legs shook with exhaustion, but now wasn't the time to rest. He backed up after he deemed it a safe distance away from the battle between All Might and All for One. Everything was riding on All Might now. He had to win for the sake of this city and the people residing in it. You have so much in common with Nana Shimura, the utter waste of a human who passed one for all on to you. All for One taunted. No matter how hard All Might was trying, his muscle form kept getting smaller and smaller. But he needed to hold it together. This fight wasn't over. Be proud, Toshinori. You went down a long, hard road to obtain this power. Of course, it's going to take a lot of work to master it. My master was a true hero. Keep her name out of your filthy mouth. He snarled, but All for One didn't care. A woman with no skill and grand ideas she couldn't live up to. How embarrassing for me, the creator of One for All, to see her inherit the power. And the way she died was so pathetic. Shall I tell you all about it? All Might growled, pulling his muscled arm back. Enough! All for One's arm fattened again and let out another Air Force attack, sending All Might flying. He coughed up blood and would have crashed into the helicopter that just appeared if his old mentor hadn't pushed him out of the way. On the ground, All for One coughed, pulling himself up. You're in the way. He snarled at Gran Torino. It's the same as the last time. Toshinori, calm down. 6 years ago, you got distracted, and that's how he escaped. And put a hole in your stomach. He used his quirk into his feet to slow their desert, landing on the ground. That's always been your weakness. Don't let him get under your skin, Gran Torino told him. All Might coughed. Yes, sir. His quirks and fighting style are completely different than they were. You won't be able to stop him head on. Use your wits. Can you still fight? It's do or die. You must go past your limit. I will. The reporters in the helicopter connected the camera, and the battle live streamed all across the world. The scene below straight out of a nightmare. Half of Kamino Ward was demolished in a single, horrifying instant. All Might is currently fighting the villain who appears to have caused the blast. I can't believe it. How is one person so powerful? He's destroyed the city and is more than holding his own against the symbol of peace. All Might covered his mouth, coughing more blood. I find myself conflicted. All for One stood, and the hero eyed the deformed face. Tamura has been the one to chip away at society's trust in heroes. So is it fair that I should land the final blow? You know, All Might, as much as you hate me, I think I probably loathe you more. I killed your master, sure. But you took away so much from me, everything I tried to build. That's why I want you to suffer until your last breath, and die broken and disgraced, for all the world to see. His arm grew, and red lightning crackled around it. All Might tensed, ready to jump away. Not everyone's so fast. The villain lifted his arm, not at him, but at the bystander trapped underneath the rubble behind him. All for One unleashed the attack. I will obliterate everything you've protected. All Might jumped in front of it, deflecting it and sending it every which way. All for One scoffed but smiled when he saw All Might again, or rather, Yagi Toshinori. Zero's eyes widened in shock. All Might had just deflated. Instead of his huge, muscular form, he was now a sickly, thin man, his hero costume hanging off him loosely. All for One chuckled. Hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. To think that you're their greatest hero. Now the adoring public knows your true form. Try not to be ashamed. Your move. Toshinori's electric blue eyes glowed as he glared at him. Even as my body rots and grows frail. Even as you expose my weakened state. In my heart, I remain the symbol of peace. And there's nothing you can do to take that from me. Is that so? Ah well, I'd forgotten how stubborn you are. I guess I'll just give up. Oh, but there is one thing you might be interested to know. Tamura Shigaraki, my apprentice? He's Nana Shimura's grandson, he said, and not one sound was made as Toshinori processed the information, eyes growing wide with horror. I kept wondering what would annihilate your golden heart. And so I found Tamura, groomed him to hate you, and watched you smile so proudly as you beat your master's descendant. Toshinori's heart stopped, his hollow eyes widening. That's a lie, Toshinori whispered hoarsely. He couldn't believe it. Oh, come now. You know it's the truth. That is clearly something I would do. Toshinori's raised fist dropped limply to his side, making All for One tilt his head. Huh. Well, that's strange. All Might. Where is your smile now? He tugged on the skin where his mouth was supposed to be and laughed again. If you have to save someone, that means they've probably gone through something terrifying. They'll be frightened. Remember that real heroes don't just save lives. They save a person's heart too. You know what I think? No matter how scared you are, you should smile to show that you'll be okay. In this world, the ones always smiling are the ones who are the strongest. You bastard. All for One continued his amused laugh. How very entertaining. I think I've taken a piece of you after all. Toshinori was going to vomit. He's my master's grandchild. My God, what would she say if she knew how we turned out? He screamed in anguish, almost not hearing the woman trapped behind him cry. Don't lose. Keep going, All Might. We need you. Zero couldn't stay up any longer, exhaustion weaving its way through his bones. Win this, he screamed. The number one hero turned to him with wide eyes. Zero just glared at him with determination. Beat him. Come on, All Might. Toshinori's right arm grew with muscles. Fear not, miss. I'm not done yet. You were right. A hero has so much to protect in this world, which is why I will defeat you. Toshinori, when you think you can't go on anymore, look inside. Remember why it is you clench your fist. Your past. Remember where you came from. Keeping your origin in mind will help push you past your limit. My origin. Of course, I want to make a world where everyone smiles and lives together happily. All for One floated into the air. There it is. That's the last of your strength, isn't it? All Might? A wounded hero is a most frightening animal. Do you know that even now I sometimes dream of you charging at me with your entrails strewn across the ground? You have, 2 or 3 punches left. He held out his fat and crackling arm again and used it to blow away the fire barreling straight towards him. Are you serious? Endeavor stomped into view. What the hell's going on with that weak little body? Zero scoffed, rolling his eyes. Edshot came up next to him and engaged in the fight with All for One. Zero grunted, managing to get on his feet again and stumbling towards the frozen hero, vaguely seeing Tiger pull the trapped woman from the rubble, as well as holding many others who got caught in the fight, both hero and civilian. He reached All Might and grabbed his thin arm. The hero jumped and spun to him. Zero pulled out one of his healing bullets. Here, this won't heal your injury, but it will give you the strength you need to finish him. He didn't let All Might speak before he shoved the needle into his chest. All Might glowed a sickly yellow as the healing properties gave All Might more energy than he had before. Maybe just enough to finish this fight in his muscle form. Zero swayed on his feet, and All Might caught him before he fell to the ground. "Thank you, Zero. I won't waste this opportunity you've given me." Zero only managed a small nod and pulled out his grappling hook. He held it shakily above him, and it shot to the roof where Blackout still resided. He stayed there, lying on the hard cement for just a few minutes when it became clear that All Might was attacking All for One again. Zero groaned and heaved himself up, simultaneously pulling the sniper from its confines and setting it up in case he needed to aid All Might again. He watched All for One grossly fatten his arm again, and All Might used the strength given to him by Zero to only grow his right arm. Their fists met, sending another strong aftershock in its wake, shattering any intact windows. Soon after, All for One started to grow his left arm to match the right. Zero decided to intervene by firing one of his explosive bullets. It made contact with All for One's growing arm and exploded. The muscles tore apart, and the boogeyman of the underworld yelled at the sudden pain, his masked face snapping up to where Zero resided. All Might punched him while he was distracted, sending him flying back. Even then, his attention never left Zero. It sent uncharacteristic shivers down his spine, his instincts screaming danger. The teenager jumped to his feet, but before he could get anywhere, those red and black blades shot out of All for One's fingertips, straight for him. They were so fast, he was so exhausted that didn't have any time to dodge. Zero coughed, sprouts of blood coming from his mouth and soaking his black face mask. He looked down with wide eyes at the 5 thin blades embedded in his body. His eyes blurred and static filled his ears. They pulled him up into the air and dangled him over the ledge. "You've interrupted Shigaraki's plans for the last time, Zero." The blades slowly pulled back into All for One fingers, bringing him with it. His arms, heavy from fatigue and blood loss, smacked against the villain's chest as he wrapped his fist around Zero's coat collar. All for One reached up and tore the mask from Zero's face, revealing Izuku Midoriya. His blood spread across his face, and more spilling from his gaping mouth. He floated up into the air again, turning Izuku so that he faced the reporters and the camera live streaming all across the world. The city square fell into a horrified hush as the live broadcast captured the shocking moment. Zero, the enigmatic vigilante, had been stabbed. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the gravity of the situation sank in. The reporters' frantic commentary mirrored the collective disbelief echoing through the stunned spectators. Katsuki Bakugo, who had been watching the broadcast with intense focus, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The shock on his face mirrored that of the onlookers. "No way," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the gasps and murmurs of the crowd. In the midst of the commotion, All for One, the mastermind behind many of the city's calamities, revealed a startling truth. "Ladies and gentlemen, heroes and citizens alike, allow me to introduce Zero, the vigilante you've come to admire, fear, and now pity." He ripped off the hood that covered Izuku's head. Izuku Midoriya, a mere 16-year-old, the revelation hung in the air, a heavy truth that cast a shadow over the hero-worshipping city. The camera zoomed in on Zero's face, now battered and vulnerable. The mask, a symbol of mystery, had concealed the face of a young hero who had shouldered the burdens of vigilantism in silence. Katsuki's shock turned to disbelief, then to a mix of anger and concern. The city, once enamored by the myth of Zero, now grappled with the reality of a teenager facing the perils of vigilantism. The weight of the revelation echoed through the crowd, a collective gasp resounding as the true identity of Zero was exposed. The news of Zero's identity being exposed as Izuku Midoriya was a revelation that sent a shockwave through the city, but not for Aizawa. He had known all along. Aizawa's worry, however, deepened as he watched the unfolding events. The crowded square, once filled with awe for the mysterious vigilante, now brimmed with a mix of shock and horror. The reporter's voice relayed the shocking truth, and Aizawa's eyes remained steady, concealing the concern that churned within. The revelation was not just about unmasking a hero, but exposing a young, 16-year-old teenager to the harsh scrutiny of the public eye. Aizawa had been aware of Izuku's choice to become Zero, but witnessing the consequences on live television intensified the weight of his concern. No, Midoriya. The broken whisper slipped past his lips as he sank into the couch. The villain had orchestrated a spectacle that not only jeopardized Izuku's safety, but thrust him into a spotlight he never sought. As the camera focused on Zero's battered face, he had mentored Izuku for 2 years, aware of the burden the young vigilante carried. The exposure of his identity was a vulnerability that went beyond physical wounds. Everyone watched Izuku as he writhed weakly in all for one's grasp, gasping for the breath that his lungs didn't receive. He vaguely saw All Might, now in his muscled form, launch himself at them. All for one tossed Izuku away like a rag doll, leaving Edgeshot to swoop in and grab him before he made contact with the ground. His eyes closed before he ever felt the warm embrace. Ever since Katsuki was young, he knew that this world wasn't fair, that everyone wasn't equal. He can't remember the time when he first met Izuku, only knew that they had known each other ever since they were infants because of the connection between their mothers. They grew up as best friends, basically brothers. They were so close that they always knew when the other was happy, angry, or, in Izuku's case, about to cry. Their relationship was unique, one that no one had ever seen before, and Katsuki had ruined that when his quirk manifested. All because Izuku had developed a weak quirk just a year after. He bullied him, called him useless, and threatened him with his explosions. He hated him, always saying that despite having a healing quirk, he would still be a hero in the field. He hated him, always following him around despite Katsuki trying to literally push him away. He hated him, always smiling and laughing, never taking the hint that Katsuki didn't want him around anymore. Always trying to get him to just leave him alone forever. He got his wish. And you know what? He missed him. When he heard that Annie Inko was killed in a villain attack and Izuku was missing, then presumed dead after the policeman's shitty 2-day search, Katsuki attended the Midoriya's funeral in shock and anger. After everything he had done to Izuku, wanting him gone and out of his way, never wanted to be associated with someone so weak. And now that he really was gone, he wanted him back, so badly that it hurt and he was never the same again. And now with the realization that he was alive, the relief he felt was ripped away from him almost imminently when he saw Izuku's bleeding body get thrown across the battlefield, so still that Katsuki had lost him once again. There was no pain when he opened his eyes again. In fact, there was nothing at all. Izuku looked around, finding nothing but white. The only color was the green strands that fell into his eyes. His vigilante costume was gone, only leaving him in comfortable white pajamas as well as matching slippers. He took a step, then another, and another, until he was walking in a straight path, trying to find something that would help him figure out where he was. His head swiveled from side to side. "Hello," he called out. His voice didn't echo. "Is there anybody here?" When he glanced to his left, he saw a figure in his peripheral vision. He spun around and froze. There was a person here with him, but not just any person. "Mom." Eri felt the familiar soft cushions of pillows and blankets before she opened her eyes. The only thing out of the ordinary was the lack of clanging pots, a sizzling stove, and Izuku's soft humming as he made them breakfast. She stretched her arms and sat up, rubbing the exhaustion from her ruby eyes. Izuku wasn't in sight. Her heart rate kicked up with apprehension of being alone. The teenager always left after she went asleep for his patrols with Eraserhead, but was always back by the time she woke up. Eri got to her feet and tenderly walked into the small kitchen area, searching for any clues about where he had gone. It was only when she got to the wooden table that she noticed the black glint of his knife sitting there. Eri pouted and climbed onto the matching chair with a comfy brown cushion sitting on top. When she made it to the desired spot, she saw a white piece of parchment underneath the weapon. The 6-year-old tilted her head curiously and slid it out, opening the folded flap. Izuku's messy but eligible words greeted her. "Eri, just wanted to let you know that I'm going out for a bit tonight. Katsuki's in trouble, and I gotta go help him. But don't worry, I'll be back before you wake up in the morning. If you get hungry, there are some snacks in the fridge. I know you're just a little girl, and the world can seem scary sometimes. Remember that you are safe here. Your lovely brother, Eri felt her lips tilt up in the smallest smile, but still felt the unease. Izuku had been gone since last night. It was morning now. Where was he? The metal door of the warehouse slid open, and Eri's instincts made her dive underneath the table with a knife in her hand. Only when familiar black boots stepped into the building did she jump out from her spot and rush to give Izuku a hug, but stopped in her tracks. It wasn't Izuku who stared at her with sad, tired eyes. "Hi, Eri," Aizawa greeted. In the dimly lit hospital room, a palpable tension hung in the air as Aizawa, Katsuki, and Eri awaited news about Izuku's condition. The sterile scent of antiseptic mingled with the hushed murmurs of hospital staff outside the door, creating a somber atmosphere that mirrored the worry etched on their faces. Aizawa, his usual stern expression softened by concern, sat in a chair near him. Katsuki, the fiery determination evident in his eyes, paced restlessly, his hands clenching and unclenching. Eri, small and fragile, clutched a plush toy close to her chest, her eyes wide with a mix of confusion and concern. The silence was broken by the occasional ticking of the clock hanging on the wall. Aizawa cast a glance at the closed door, mentally urging the medical team to bring some news. Katsuki, unable to contain his restlessness, stopped his pacing and turned to Aizawa. "You know all this time, and you didn't tell me that he was alive?" He muttered, betrayal etched in his features. Aizawa sighed, his gaze fixed on the closed door. "He didn't want you to know, Bakugo." "Not yet." He wasn't ready. The door creaked open, and a nurse stepped in, her expression neutral. The trio leaned forward, eager for any update. The nurse offered a small but reassuring smile. "He's stable now. The surgery went well, and he's in recovery. You can see him in a little while." A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Katsuki's shoulders visibly relaxed, and Eri's grip on her plush toy loosened. Aizawa nodded in gratitude to the nurse before she left the room. "Mom?" Izuku uttered, his voice carrying a mix of astonishment and disbelief. Inko Midoriya's presence exuded a serene calmness, a stark contrast to the tumultuous events that had unfolded in the world he had left behind. She stepped forward, her figure bathed in an otherworldly light. "Izuku, my baby," she spoke, her voice a gentle melody that seemed to resonate through the infinite white space. Her identical green eyes shined with unshed tears. "You've grown up so much." Tears welled up in Izuku's eyes as he took a tentative step toward her. The reunion with his deceased mother felt like a dream, yet the profound sense of comfort she emanated was undeniably real. Izuku, overcome with a flood of emotions, rushed forward and embraced his mother in a tight hug. Tears streamed down his face as he clung to her, his shoulders shaking with the weight of unspoken grief, love, and the overwhelming joy of this unexpected reunion. Inko, in turn, wrapped her arms around her son, holding him close. The ethereal glow around them seemed to intensify, casting a soft, comforting light on the tender moment they shared in this otherworldly space. As Izuku sobbed into his mother's shoulder, he felt a mixture of pain and relief. The pain of losing her, of facing the challenges alone, and the relief of this transient moment where the boundaries between life and whatever lay beyond blurred. "I miss you so much, Mom," Izuku choked out between sobs, his words muffled against her shoulder. The hospital room was cloaked in a heavy silence as Katsuki Bakugo, Shota Aizawa, and Eri remained by Izuku Midoriya's bedside. Katsuki, still processing the revelation that Izuku was alive, found himself grappling with a myriad of emotions. He glanced at the unconscious form of his childhood friend, his usual fiery demeanor subdued by the weight of the moment. "Damn it, Deku," Katsuki muttered, a mix of frustration and a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "You better not die on us now. I haven't even had the chance to punch you for making us think you were dead." Aizawa, standing nearby, observed the scene with a grave expression. Eri clutched onto her plush toy, her eyes wide with concern. The room seemed to hold its breath as they awaited any sign of change in Izuku's condition. As Katsuki continued to speak, pouring out his thoughts and frustrations to the unconscious Izuku, a sudden alarm pierced the air. The heart monitor displayed erratic patterns, and Aizawa's eyes widened with concern. Eri gasped, her small hands covering her mouth. "Deku!" Katsuki exclaimed, his voice tinged with a panic that betrayed the depth of his feelings. "Don't you dare give up now, you damn nerd!" A medical team rushed into the room, and Aizawa ushered Eri to a corner, shielding her from the chaos. The urgency in the air was palpable as the medical professionals worked swiftly to stabilize Izuku. The room descended into chaos, the flurry of activity contrasting with the stark stillness that had lingered moments before. Aizawa's gaze remained fixed on Izuku's unconscious form, a silent plea for the young vigilante to fight against the encroaching darkness. As the medical team battled to revive Izuku, Katsuki's fists clenched in frustration. The gravity of the situation hung heavily in the air. In the midst of the chaos, the heart monitor emitted a steady, continuous beep. Time seemed to freeze, and Aizawa, Katsuki, and Eri held their breath, waiting for a sign that Izuku would overcome this critical moment and emerge from the brink of unconsciousness. Inko gently stroked his hair, whispering words of comfort. "I missed you too, baby, but you've grown into such a remarkable young man. I couldn't be prouder." In the midst of the embrace, Inko gently stroked Izuku's hair, offering silent comfort. The passage of time became a fleeting concept in that tranquil space, allowing Izuku to pour out his heart to the woman who had guided him, even in her absence. Eventually, as the intensity of their emotions began to subside, Inko pulled back slightly, cupping Izuku's tear-streaked face in her hands. She offered a tender smile, her eyes reflecting a mother's eternal love. Izuku wiped his eyes, giving his mother a wobbly smile. "Can I come with you?" Inko smiled widely. "Of course." Katsuki watched with a pale face as the heart monitor's screeching went from rapid beeping to a continuous flat line. Izuku's heart had stopped before this, and he was always brought back. But now the doctors slowly stopped their efforts, all with a look that would forever be haunting Katsuki's mind. One of the doctors sighed, placing the defibrillators back on their stands before saying those forbidden words. "Time of death, 1653. A strangled noise came out of Aizawa, one that Katsuki had never heard before. Eri, the poor girl, let out a sob, hiding in Aizawa's shoulder as she cried uncontrollably. Katsuki only stood there, watching the medical turn off the heart monitor and covering the body with a white sheet. The body. Izuku's body. His best friend was dead once again, but he couldn't believe it. No. In that moment, anger twisted his face and his hands popped erratically. "Bullshit," he growled in the semi-silent room. The doctors turned to him, grief that they had no right to have on their faces. Katsuki snarled, "No, you can't just give up on him like this." Katsuki shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "Bring him back. Do something, damn it." The doctors exchanged somber glances, their expressions filled with sympathy. "I'm sorry," one of them said gently. "There's nothing more we can do." The teenager shook, with rage or containing the sobs that crawled up his throat. He didn't know. His vision blurred, and he didn't try to stop the tears that dripped to the floor. "He's not dead. He can't be. Do something, damn it." They didn't move. Katsuki roared and lunged, explosions growing before they suddenly stopped, and arms wrapped around his body, pulling him back. Katsuki struggled against his teacher. "Let me go. Let go," he cried. The doctors nodded at each other and left the room. "Get back here. You can't leave him, Dash," he choked. His eyes found the body under the sheets again, and he slumped in Aizawa's tight hold. A raw scream of despair escaped his throat, and Katsuki's legs gave out, taking him and Aizawa to the floor. Katsuki screamed and screamed, so loud that they were certain the entire hospital heard it. Izuku was gone, and Katsuki was certain that he wasn't coming back. Katsuki never thought that he would ever have to attend a funeral after the Midoriyas all those years ago. But there he was watching the grave of his best friend get lowered into the ground, as the earth enveloped Izuku's casket, sealing him away from the world forever. Katsuki felt as if a part of himself had been buried alongside him. Everyone was there. His parents stood on either side of him. Class A and B gathered around in grief of the man who had helped them train and save them from the villains. Aizawa holding Eri with present Mike clutching his hand. All three with faces of sorrow and grief. The heroes that Zero had greatly impacted during his time as a vigilante. And a huge amount of civilians came to pay their respect to the teenager that they had cheered for and loved. The ceremony was over in just an hour, and everyone started dispersing. His parents squeezed his shoulders before walking away too. Soon enough, Katsuki was on his own. Even after the graveyard had emptied and the dark clouds rolled in, thunder booming, and the teenager hardly felt the rain soak his black clothes. He just kept staring at the fresh lump of dirt and the new gravestone that stood next to Inko. Izuku Midoriya, a friend, son, and brother. A hero. Katsuki stayed until the rain stopped, until the sun set over the horizon and he couldn't see the words on the gravestone. And only when Kirishima returned to the graveyard and guided him out did he leave Izuku. But he could have sworn that as he walked away, he felt the faintest arms lay over his shoulders, hugging him from behind. Izuku's final goodbye. Life was never the same after that, but it moved on. After the fight between All for One and All Might, the League of Villains was in custody, All Might had retired, and everything slowly went back to normal, all thanks to Zero. Everyone had mourned the vigilante that they had acknowledged and accepted for 4 years, but Aizawa, Eri, Present Mike, and Katsuki mourned Izuku Midoriya, the boy that they had come to know and love. The boy who saved Eri from her dark past. The boy who Katsuki had ever wanted to be a part of his life. Katsuki was never the same again, but he kept trying, and in the end, after 3 years of climbing the ranks, he became number 1, just like he had always dreamed. With his friends by his side, he became the person that everyone loved and admired. Life moved on for everyone. They married and had families. Kota and Eri grew up and became hero students. Aizawa was still a huge part of their lives, still treating them like they were his students, but became the confidant in their lives as they continued their work as pros. The only thing that Katsuki needed was the boy that he buried 15 years ago. The boy that he would swear he kept seeing in his reflection, always wearing that damn smile that Katsuki missed. And now, as he walked to meet with his friends, he stared at the sky with a soft smile. I'll see you again someday, so you better be fucking ready, Deku. 'Cause I'm never letting you go again. Hey, Bakugo! Katsuki looked forward again, where the entire class of 1A stood, all waving with smiles. The blonde rolled his eyes, his scowl replacing the smile he had only moments before, and he stomped over to them. The people that he never wanted, but never knew he needed. Inko gently stroked his hair, whispering words of comfort. I missed you too, baby. But you've grown into such a remarkable young man. I couldn't be prouder. In the midst of the embrace, Inko gently stroked Izuku's hair, offering silent comfort. The passage of time became a fleeting concept in that tranquil space, allowing Izuku to pour out his heart to the woman who had guided him, even in her absence. Eventually, as the intensity of their emotions began to subside, Inko pulled back slightly, cupping Izuku's tear-streaked face in her hands. She offered a tender smile, her eyes reflecting a mother's eternal love. Izuku wiped his eyes, giving his mother a wobbly smile. Can I come with you? Inko smiled widely. Of course. Izuku sighed and started walking forward, only for his mother to stop him with a hand on his chest. He furrowed his brows and turned back to her. Her smile turned solemn. But not yet. Izuku opened his mouth to protest, but she cupped his face again. It's not your time yet. I can't allow you to pass here. There are people who are waiting for you to return. Don't you worry about me. You will see me again. Just promise me that you will live. I don't want you to come back here until you're ready. She wiped away the tears that still escaped from his eyes. I know you blame yourself. There is nothing to forgive because none of it was your fault. Remember that when you go back. His lips trembled and he nodded. I promise. A tear slipped past Inko's eye. I love you so much, Izuku. So do the people that are waiting for you. She stood on her toes, pressing a kiss to his forehead before she suddenly pushed him, and he fell. Soft beeping was the first thing that Izuku heard as consciousness slowly returned. Then the soft weight of a small body tucked against his side, and the feeling of a calloused hand cupping his own. Everything was fuzzy, slowly coming back to him in pieces. Kaken being kidnapped, fighting the League, getting stabbed, and his identity being revealed. His mother. He tensed, and the beeping became slightly more frantic. The weight on his side and hand jolted, and the sound of chairs scraping back. A whine escaped Izuku's mouth before a sob made his chest heave. "Mom," he whimpered, and a hand carted through his hair. It wasn't her. This hand was bigger, rougher, and inexperienced. "Midoriya." Another sob shook his frame, and the same small body draped over his chest in a hug. He reached up and squeezed what felt like an oxygen mask. That hand left his hair, and over the one on the mask. "Leave it on, Midoriya. Let it help you." The man spoke. Aizawa. Aizawa was here. He cracked his eyes open as much as he could and looked down when something lightly squeezed him, only to see a head of white on his chest. "Eri." His shaky hands reached up again and held her closer. Ignore the pain it caused him. He blinked, looking up and finding Aizawa standing over him. "She forgave me," he whispered. At Aizawa's questioning look, Izuku said, "My mom, she forgave me." The teacher's eyes softened. He listened attentively, recognizing the significance of Izuku's words. The weight of guilt that had burdened the young hero seemed to lift, if only for a moment. Aizawa placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, offering silent support. "Of course she did, kid. You did nothing wrong. I never got to say goodbye properly," Izuku continued, his voice trembling. "But she told me she's proud of who I've become." The man nodded. "As she should be. You're going to be okay. I promise." He went back to petting his hair. Izuku dragged his hand sluggishly down Eri's shaking body before it stopped completely and his eyes closed again, falling asleep by the hand stroking his hair, just like she used to. Izuku Midoriya's eyes fluttered open for the second time in the hospital room, the sterile surroundings momentarily disorienting. The soft beeping of the medical equipment and the subdued lighting brought a sense of familiarity. As his vision cleared, Izuku noticed a figure sitting in a chair by his bedside. Katsuki Bakugo, the one who had thought Izuku was gone for 4 long years, looked up from his silent vigil. His red eyes widened in disbelief, a mix of shock and overwhelming emotion crossing his face. "Deku," he whispered as if testing the reality of the moment. Izuku managed a weak smile behind the oxygen mask, feeling a surge of gratitude for the friend who had believed him lost. "Yeah, Kaken. I'm here." "Deku, you were dead. For 4 years," Katsuki finally uttered, his voice carrying a mix of frustration and relief. And then you flatlined. Your heart stopped. You were..." Izuku's eyes widened at the revelation, a profound realization of the impact his disappearance had on those he left behind. "Kaken, he began, but the words caught in his throat. Katsuki's expression softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through his usual tough exterior. "You better have a damn good explanation for this, Deku," he said, a hint of a teasing smirk attempting to mask the genuine concern. Izuku chuckled weakly, the weight of the years of separation and the recent events settling in. "I promise, Kaken. I'll tell you everything." Without a word, Katsuki leaped from the chair and engulfed Izuku in a tight, uncharacteristically emotional hug. The weight of 4 years of grief, anger, and the perceived loss of a dear friend found release in that embrace. Tears welled up in Katsuki's eyes as he held onto Izuku, the reality of his friend's presence sinking in. "I thought you were dead, you damn nerd," Katsuki muttered, his voice muffled against Izuku's hospital gown. "I'm sorry, Kaken," Izuku whispered, reciprocating the hug as best as he could. "I never meant to hurt you like that." A mixture of relief and lingering pain filled the room. The unspoken emotions that had built up over the years seemed to unravel in that moment of reunion. As Katsuki finally pulled back, his red eyes bore into Izuku's, searching for reassurance and answers. Izuku's gaze met Katsuki's. He reached up and pulled the mask over his head. His lips twitched, and he felt his eyes get hot. A laugh escaped, and then a sob. He pulled his best friend back into a hug, and the teen reciprocated the action with his own, Katsuki's hand coming up to cup the back of his head. Every time I saw you, I wanted to tell you so bad. I wanted you to know that I was alive, that I missed you so much. He felt Katsuki start to shake and his shoulder get damp. I meant what I said in the training camp. I'm so proud that you got this far. Katsuki let out a sob, tightening his hold. He pulled back, wiping the tear tracks on his red cheeks. Move over, Deku. He grumbled, a hint of his usual brashness returning. Izuku chuckled weakly, understanding the unspoken invitation. He shuffled slightly, making room for Katsuki on the hospital bed. When he climbed in, they grabbed each other's hands and squeezed. Just like old times, huh? Katsuki huffed with a smile. Just like old times, he whispered back. Izuku was starting to breathe heavier, getting dizzy. Oops, maybe that oxygen mask really was helping him. Katsuki lifted his head from the pillow, noticing Izuku's struggles, and cursed. He reached up and grabbed the deposited mask, slipping it back over his face. You idiot, he said. Izuku smiled softly under the plastic. Now reassured of having Katsuki finally by his side, he fell asleep. Izuku stared outside of the glass hospital doors where civilians, policemen, and reporters were basically yelling at each other. He could hear them from down the hall. They were so loud. He had no doubt that they were here for him. Izuku didn't consider himself a hero at all, but if this was what it was like to be this popular, then he understood why Aizawa was an underground hero. Maybe it was because he was by himself for so long that he became more of an introvert than he thought. He shook his head, spinning on his heel. Nope, I'm jumping out the window. He barely got 4 steps when Aizawa grabbed his shoulder. Oh no, you don't. You either walk out those doors, or I'm carrying you. And you really don't want people to see you, a teenager, being carried out of this hospital like a child. He raised an eyebrow, and Izuku knew the man well enough that he would do it. He huffed, cheeks puffing out. Izuku ignored the stares he was getting from inside the hospital and crossed his arms. Were these the consequences you were telling me about? He sighed, shoulders sagging. What am I supposed to do now? Zero is a part of me. I can't just give him up. Aizawa stared at his defeated expression, the bottom half of his face hidden behind his capture weapon. He reached back into his pocket and handed him an envelope. Izuku took it hesitantly, eyes flicking up to the man and down to the white envelope. His eyes widened, though, when he saw the signature seal of UA on the back to keep it closed. He held his breath and ripped it open, pulling the folded paper out. Congratulations! You have been accepted into UA's rehabilitation program. Izuku's jaw dropped open. Fingers tightened around the paper as he scanned over the long acceptance letter. Now, are we going to stand here all day? Or am I going to take you to the dorms we just had put in place? Aizawa said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. Izuku gulped, then masked his growing anxiety with a dramatic sigh, folding the paper back up and waving it like he didn't care that his life was about to take a turn for the worst. Or better, whatever. He spun around and marched out of the hospital. As soon as the doors slid open, every head snapped his way and microphones were shoved into his face with cameras making his vision white every few seconds. He was bombarded with questions too loud and fast for him to comprehend. He didn't mean to scream. Really. But how else was he supposed to answer all of the thousands of questions these vultures have? Quiet. Everyone stopped. Other than the occasional click of cameras, there was finally silence. Izuku sighed. You guys are so loud, I can't even hear you. I'll cut to the chase. I'll tell you everything you need to know. Yes, I'm the Vigilante Zero. Yes, I am 16 years old. No, I will not tell you why or how I became a vigilante, nor what my quirk is. He grinned. Good day. He pushed through the crowd as they started to scream at him again. An arm settled around his shoulders, and Aizawa guided him in the waiting car with present Mike in the driver's seat. Izuku sagged in the back seat. As soon as Aizawa closed the passenger seat, the voice hero shot out of the parking lot before the reports could swarm the car. Well, that could have gone better. You need lessons on how to speak to the public problem child. No response. He looked over his shoulder and saw the relaxed face of his new student. He and Hizashi smiled at each other and stayed in silence for the rest of the ride. This is pretty impressive, Izuku said as he stared at the Class 1A dorms. Even more so since you did it in under 2 weeks. Aizawa stuffed his hands into his pockets. We've been thinking about building the dorms ever since the USJ attack. It was easier since we had all of the plans laid out. The teacher walked up the steps and opened the huge doors to the building. Izuku followed and admired the spacious common room. Wow, this is where the students are living? I'm pretty jealous. He chuckled. Don't be. This'll be your home too for the next 4 years or so. Izuku spun around. What? Aizawa rolled his black eyes. Did you forget that you're a part of the rehabilitation program? One of your conditions is to stay on the campus. Both you and Eri. Izuku didn't know what to say, so he just stood there dumbly. Aizawa didn't look fazed. In fact, he just walked past him. Come on, follow me. I'll show you to your room. The boy only nodded and followed him to the elevator. Good call. Even though Izuku was healed, his body was still suffering from the side effects of his quirk. He didn't think he could handle the stairs. When the elevator opened, the hallway split from left to right. Aizawa turned left. The boys' dorms are this way, he said over his shoulder, making Izuku hurry to follow him. Aizawa led him all the way to the end of the hall and stopped in front of the door in the middle of the hall. A key card was handed to him, and Izuku swiped it through the key slot and twisted the handle, opening the door to his new home. 2 twin beds sat in the 2 back corners of the room, with a window and balcony in between. He figured that his bedroom was bigger than the other since 2 people would be staying in there, given that there were 2 sets of everything. Izuku walked in further. It was definitely going to take some getting used to after living in the warehouse for 4 years. Izuku's eyes softened, however, at Eri's apparent side of the room. Unlike Izuku's plain, undecorated space, Eri's was decorated like the princess she was. Her bed was made with pink covers and blankets with many stuffed animals piled on top. Children's books underneath her nightstand. Izuku walked to her dresser and opened the first drawer. Clothes were piled inside, more than she has now. His eyes closed, a smile tilting his lips. Eri is going to love it here. This is perfect, Izuku said, turning to his new teacher. Eri will be happy here. Aizawa's eyebrow raised. And you? He took a deep breath. Yeah, maybe I will be too. Izuku did what very few have done before. He stared Principal Nizu in the eye without falter. President Mike shifted where he sat, and Aizawa was stiff with apprehension. The 2 of them meeting was a terrible, terrible mistake. Izuku Midoriya, you are in quite a predicament. I understand that you still desire to continue your work as Zero. The teenager nodded. Yes, he said curtly. Nizu hummed, thumbing or rather pawing through his file. I see. Since you can no longer return to vigilantism, it only makes sense to become a hero to be Zero without legal consequence. Izuku pursed his lips. Becoming a hero was the last thing he wanted to do, but his desire to be Zero again quickly overcame it. That's right, he said, a growl slipping through his tone. Nizu looked him in the eye again. I'm sure that won't be a problem. I pulled some strings, and with your talent from vigilantism, I was able to get you approved to take the provisional licensing exam. You may need to stay an extra year for your rehab program, but you can still graduate with the others. You'll be a pro in no time. Izuku leaned back, trying and failing to pretend that he was okay with it. Great! With the League of Villains in Tartarus, we have less on our plate to worry about, and we can focus more on the students' futures. Thank you, Midoriya. You were a huge help in the capture of the League. I'm sorry that law enforcement interfered with it in the end, and that becoming a hero is the worst idea for you. But I'm afraid that this is the only option I can give you. Izuku sighed, rubbing his eyes. He was so tired. It's not like it's your fault. Besides, you've done a lot of things to help me go back to being Zero faster. So, I should be the one thanking you. Nizu smiled. Oh, and one more thing. I don't think you'll benefit from being a student. Your IQ is extraordinary. No. I think that while you are here, you could become Aizawa's assistant and help the students improve. What do you say? The teenager blinked, looking at Aizawa, who nodded. Izuku smiled. Yeah, okay. I like the sound of that. I believe I mentioned this already, but your main focus this summer is obtaining provisional hero licenses. Do not take this lightly. A hero license means that you're responsible for human lives. You can imagine that the exam to receive one is very difficult. Only a few % of students pass the tests required for these permits each year. In order to prepare, today you'll concentrate on creating something new. 2 ultimate moves. Ultimate moves? An exam is a normal school thing, but this is total hero work. The door slid open. Cementas, Midnight, and Ectoplasm walked in. When we say ultimate, we mean a move that will ensure you win against your opponent. An action so unique to your identity that no other person can hope to copy it. Simply put, you must learn to lean into your strengths. Your moves represent who you are. These days, most pro heroes have an ultimate move. Those who don't are fools. This may sound abstract, but we'll explain more as the day goes on. For now, change into your costumes and meet in Gym Gamma. 20 minutes later, everyone walked through the doors of a huge empty space. Gym Gamma, also known at the Academy as the Training Dining Land, or TDL. Cementas walked forward and created a small structure for training. This facility was my idea. We can prepare unique terrains and obstacles for each student here. Here you will learn to serve up justice. Hence the name. That's pretty cool. Ida's hand shot into the air. Please allow me a question. What is the advantage of having ultimate moves for our provisional exam? May we know your reasoning? Aizawa's eye twitched. That's 2 questions. Calm down. The job of a hero is to save people from all sorts of dangers. Crime, accidents, and natural or man-made disasters. Of course, the licensing exam analyzes how well you're able to deal with such things. It won't just be fighting. Your ability to gather information and make quick decisions will be judged, in addition to how well you communicate, cooperate, and lead others. Every year a new test is used to evaluate these qualities. One thing is especially important. If you want to be a pro hero, you must be able to prevail in battle. He paused, ignoring the hands that shot into the air. Also, someone will be joining us today. A new student, if you will. He'll be doing the exam with you all. Just then, the doors to the gym opened, and everyone gasped. Zero stood there, hands in his pockets with Blackout strapped to his back. The attack at Kamino Ward was 3 weeks ago, and they hadn't seen a trace of the teenager other than him being the hot topic on the news. They were all happy to see him, even if they weren't friends. He was on his feet and breathing. That was enough for them. Zero walked into the gym to stand next to Aizawa. I'll be helping Mr. Aizawa with your training. Just because you know I'm your age doesn't mean that my instruction is void. The class shivered at the familiar glint in his eyes. Are you ready? They all passed. After the grueling training that they went through with Aizawa, Zero, and Ectoplasm, everyone passed the provisional licensing exam. School continued as normal. Work studies were announced, and some lucky students had the honor of participating in it. Izuku and Katsuki had grown closer than ever before, like nothing had changed for them. Eri finally started to learn some control over her quirk by slowly practicing on lizards. Everyone loved her, and so did she. He was proud that she was healing. She deserved nothing less than that. And then came the day of the school festival. Class 1A decided to play in a band for the talent show, and when they performed with music and their quirk, the miracle happened. Eri finally smiled. Izuku was so happy that he broke into tears. And that grin never left her face. Izuku thought he would go blind from how bright it was, and he was okay with that. Ever since he had rescued her, his only goal was to make her smile. Izuku hated that he came to UA not only for rehab, but to become a hero. And in that moment, seeing her smile was worth the sacrifice. The two of them did everything the festival had to offer. Today, the UA school festival was for everyone, but for Izuku, today was just for this little girl in front of him. He never wanted to see a tear escape her eyes again, never wanted to see the fear, sadness, or tension in her shoulders ever again. No, that smile will never leave her face. Not if he could help it. When the sun went down, Izuku noticed her happiness start to fade at the entrance of the dorms. Izuku kneeled down in front of her. One more thing, Eri had mentioned early after he rescued her that her favorite fruit was apples. So, she glanced up and Izuku pulled out a red candy apple. Got a surprise for ya? Eri's eyes widened, and she took the stick from his hand and brought it to her mouth. She bit into the candy, and after a second of tasting it, she licked her lips to rid of the sticky sugar, and Izuku finished his goal. Eri smiled again. It's the best thing ever. He grunted when her small body slammed into him, knocking him on his back. He chuckled and wrapped his arms around her, sitting up so she wouldn't drop the apple into the grass. I'm happy you had fun today, he said, resting his chin on her head. Eri sighed against him. Thank you. Thank you for saving me, she whispered. Those words caused him to tighten his hold. Nothing will ever hurt this girl again. Not if he could help it. Izuku sat on the roof of the dorms when everyone was asleep, making sure that Blackout was kept clean. There wasn't much he could do with it. UA had space where he could go in and practice, but it wasn't as thrilling as it used to be. Flying through the air, chasing down the criminals, and keeping as many people safe as he could. His restrictions prevented that, even now that he had his license. He sighed, placing the sniper back into its case when he heard the door open. What are you doing up here, Deku? He turned to see Katsuki in his sweats and t-shirt coming to sit next to him. I just needed some air. Izuku moved his head back to stare at the stars. I can't believe I'm here, training to be a hero. Something that I never wanted since Mom died. But Eri is happy here and seeing you again. He shook his head and looked at his best friend with a soft smile. Growing up, I don't think becoming a hero was really my end goal. Not my real dream. Katsuki furrowed his brow, but didn't interrupt. I think my dream was to always be by your side. Becoming a hero was more of an extra passion. You're going to be a great hero one day, Kakin, and I can't wait to see it. They stared at each other before Katsuki sked and turned away, but not before Izuku saw the faint blush on his cheeks. Whatever, you stupid nerd, he grumbled, making Izuku laugh. They sat in silence for a few minutes before Izuku suddenly leaned into him. Katsuki stiffened. Katsuki never thought he would ever get to experience this feeling again. When they were little, Izuku was very clingy. He would stay as close to his side as possible, and surprisingly, he never minded. It always felt like Izuku relied on Katsuki to protect him. It made him stronger, made him more passionate about wanting to become a hero. Katsuki closed his eyes and laid his cheek on his green, fluffy hair. You have no idea how much I've missed you. As Izuku knelt before his mother's grave, a sense of calm washed over him, replacing the lingering ache with acceptance. He arranged the peonies with care, their vibrant petals a testament to the beauty of life, even amidst loss. Mom, I did it. You told me to keep living, and I have. I'm graduating UA today. I wish you could be here to see it, to see me become the hero you always knew I would become. He smiled, running a cloth over her gravestone to wipe off the dirt that clung to it after not visiting her for so long. I've made friends. I have people who believe in me. He spoke of the challenges faced, the friendships forged, and the lessons learned, each memory a cherished treasure. There were moments when I longed for your guidance, your reassurance, he admitted, a small smile tugging at his lips. But in those moments, I found strength within myself. Your spirit, your unwavering belief in me. It was always there, guiding me forward. As he shared his experiences, he felt a sense of peace settle within him. I've come to realize that life is a journey filled with twists and turns, victories and setbacks. And through it all, I've learned to embrace every moment, every emotion, he said, his gaze fixed on her name carved into the stone. Mom, I may not have all the answers, but I know one thing for certain. I'm going to be okay, he declared, his voice echoing with conviction. You no longer have to worry about me. He leaned forward until his forehead was on the stone. I'll see you again, and when I do, I'll tell you everything. He walked away with a light heart. Years of grief gone. He walked out of the cemetery with a smile. A warm breeze washed over him, and he knew that his mother was watching. Today was the day. His rehabilitation was finished. Exactly 1 year ago today, Class 1A graduated and became pro-heroes. Izuku, unfortunately, had to stay at UA, but he became a ward and Aizawa's assistant with all of his new classes. Well, when he didn't expel them anyway. But today was the day he was finally being released and officially becoming a pro. But now, he sat in the small dorm that belonged to him and his 10-year-old sister who had been clingy all week, and no matter how many times he told her that he wasn't going anywhere, she still didn't seem to believe him. With all of the training she had gotten on her quirk over the 4 years they were there, Eri was certainly going to have great control over it when she enrolled at UA. I promise, Eri, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be living here, just going to be gone for most of the day. I heard that Koda was going to come stay here for the week. Aren't you excited? Koda and Eri had become the best of friends over the years, probably as close as Izuku and Katsuki were. He had no doubt that they were going to be together one day, and Izuku couldn't think of anyone else more perfect for her. Eri sighed, sitting up and clasping her hands in her lap. Yeah, I guess. But you won't be with us. You're going to be gone all day. Izuku laughed. I don't see how it's any different than before. I'm still gone all day, helping the faculty train the students, he said with amusement. Eri huffed, swinging her legs. At least you were on campus and not leaving. I was allowed to be with you too. Her brother softened, and he placed his hand on her head. Once you become a hero student and get to have internships and work studies, you'll be able to work with me. I'm not leaving you, Eri. Not ever. If you ever need me, I'm always one call away. Besides, if you worry about me, then just remember that I'm going to be working with Kakin and the others. We'll have each other's back. And really, I'm more of a distance fighter than close combat. He reassured and noticed Eri start to relax. Yeah. The front door opened, and they looked over their shoulders to see Aizawa and Principal Nizu walk in, the former carrying the case with Zero's costume. You ready, Midoriya? Nizu asked, and Izuku nodded, standing and taking the case from Aizawa before going to his room in the back to change. The more equipment he slipped on, the more he felt at ease. It had been so long since he put this costume on for something other than training. When he finished, he grabbed Blackout's case and looked at his reflection. Zero stared back. The villain, Supersonic, clad in a sleek black suit adorned with pulsating soundwave emblems, grinned wickedly as he taunted the trio. You heroes think you can stop me? He sneered, his voice amplified by the waves of sound rippling around him. Without hesitation, Dynamite charged forward, explosions erupting from his palms as he aimed to close the distance. But before he could unleash his full firepower, Supersonic let loose a deafening blast of sound, sending shockwaves reverberating through the air. Dynamite gritted his teeth, his ears ringing from the assault, but he refused to falter. With a roar of determination, he pushed through the disorienting noise, his explosions lighting up the sky as he closed in on the villain. Think again, you bastard. He brought his thumb and index finger together against his right gloved hand that started to glow. AP shot. A flurry of explosions shot from his hands and managed to hit the villain, who didn't have time to dodge. Red Riot and Todoroki rushed in to apprehend him, but Supersonic managed to stand back up and release another shockwave, sending the three of them back and destroying the buildings around them. Dynamite growled and reached up. When he pulled his hand away from his ear, he noticed the blood soaking his gloves. Bastard burst my eardrums. He glanced to the side to see his partners struggling to stand, blood running from their ears as well. He growled, Damn, we need backup. The faintest of laughs managed to slip past the agonizing ringing in his ears. He looked back to the villain who was walking towards them. We all can't at his... The three heroes shakily got to their feet, breathing hard. Supersonic grinned at them and kept moving his mouth. Dynamite choked and coughed up bits of blood. He stared at his lips to gather what he was saying. Fun, but this is the end. He sucked in a breath, and the three of them prepared to counter it. How? They didn't know, but they won't give up. Not until they die. The villain hardly released his quirk when another explosion sounded. It didn't belong to Dynamite, though. Boom! Something whizzed past his head and struck the villain, cutting off his attack and making him convulse. The three heroes' eyes widened, and they spun around where another hero walked out of the dust cloud, reloading his sniper. Looks like your plans hit a sour note, he quipped, his voice laced with confidence as he stood tall. But don't worry, I'm here to remix them into something a little more heroic. He smirked underneath his mask, looking at Red Riot and Todoroki's relieved faces, before turning to his best friend. I'm back, Zero sang. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Vigilante Deku Had a Healing Quirk? We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to Ground Zero Bakugo for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on archiveofourown.org for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.